Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. For those of you who were here yesterday, you know we had to push one of the talks till this morning, so you're just going to get a brief welcome from me, so welcome. Today's talks are actually some of the most powerful ones, I think, of the entire symposium. They're really focused on how we at the Toledo Zoo are worried about sustaining the next generation of zoo professionals and conservationists. And we do that not just here, but we do that around the world. And so you're going to see some talks from the Toledo Zoo team, but also some talks from our international partners of some amazing work that's being done. And I think this is just incredible. So I'm hoping with the weather being as cold that there are a lot of people streaming at home and watching this. But first, we're going to hear about the work that's being done in South Africa right now that connects our zoo elephant populations with wild elephant populations. Dr. Kari Morfeld will be doing that presentation. She's done a lot of work with the zoo. She's responsible in no small part for Kurka, our baby elephant, being born. And you're going to hear a lot about that this morning. So, Dr. Morfeld. We got a green, just a green button.
Green button.
That
Gotcha.
advances it.
Okay. Any of these? Yep. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for the nice welcome. And thanks, everybody, for their patience. So obviously, I was on the schedule yesterday. I'm not going to dwell on this, but chronic asthma sometimes gets you when you least expect it. So the hospital was lovely, and I'm back and breathing great. So I apologize to any people that were not here, that were here, that didn't get to hear the talk. And thank you all for your grace. So let's talk elephants. So I think the first day we were here, one of the scientists said, what humans are not is patient. I will have to disagree with that a little bit because an elephant's gestation is about 2 years long. So pregnancy is 22 months. So I think I'm one of the most patient scientists there are when it comes to elephants. When it comes to moving conservation and impact forward, I'm a little bit impatient, which you'll see today. I'm going to talk a lot about South Africa and Southern Africa in general, but I can't start that journey without pointing out this team here. Now, I know they were all here yesterday to hear the talk. They couldn't be here this morning, but this is the Toledo Zoo elephant crew. And there's Kurka and Renee over there. And I just have to say thanks to the Toledo Zoo for trusting me and going on that journey. It took so much effort. Lots of years of defining boundaries and using data from Africa to enable Renee to have this calf. And it's a huge, huge blessing, and it set the way forward for a lot of zoos to follow suit. So without this team, that's not possible, and we're just starting. So thanks to Toledo Zoo doing that. 125 years in, I will guarantee this next 125 years, their impact on elephants, not just here, but globally, is going to be huge. And we invite you all to join us in that journey. So yeah, I'm talking about Africa, but I'm going to talk about zoos too, because my job, what I feel I'm called to do, is bridge that gap between how zoos and how work in Africa and other countries are directly related and help each other. So I get the question all the time, should elephants be in zoos? Why are you doing work in zoos? Why are you doing work in Africa? Shouldn't you be in zoos? So I hope today I can tell you it's not an either or. You have the same hearts, the same people, the same issues on both sides, and they're connected. So the more we work together, and Toledo Zoo is helping bridge that gap, the more we help individual elephants and also populations. So I'm going to talk about African elephants today. So that's the species that the Toledo Zoo houses as well. Just as a brief overview, just showing you the AZA, which is the governing body of welfare for zoo elephants, how many elephants there are, and by sex. There's not a lot. So to me, each one of these 163, each one of these elephants deserves individualized care and studying. That's not a lot, right? We can do this. So this is alarming. When I first started to study elephants, did a lot of work with population modeling and found out that elephants were to be extinct in zoos within 50 years. Now this was about 10 years ago, right? And to me, that's not okay. They shouldn't be extinct in the wild. They shouldn't be extinct in zoos. We need to be in charge of changing this trajectory. How do we do that? So I'm a reproductive physiologist. So of course, my passion around this was looking at the reproductive health of all of these animals. and did a study and found out that over half of elephants of reproductive age weren't even capable of having a calf. Now that's different. I've been going to Africa since I was 18, and I saw firsthand elephants have calves in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. They actually don't go through a menopause. They can have calves throughout their entire lifespan. That was different. That was different from what we were in seeing zoos. And it's not to blame, right? But it's like, what can we do to better to increase that? I'm going to give you an example here of why this is relevant and why Africa comes into play. Let's just look at the male population in general. So you have about 50 males, African males. That's a lot of males. You would think, we're great, right? That's a lot of genetic diversity. I'm not going to get into all the genetics today, but genetic diversity is important to prevent inbreeding and other things that can happen with that. So here's our population by numbers. You have 18 juveniles. Obviously, those aren't in your reproductive potential, but here you have your adolescents, young adults, and adults. Okay, so you have potentially 32 breeders. That's still really high. But when you look at what really happens, so on paper that looks fine. When you look at really what's happening, of all the zoo populations, you only have 11 males represented. Of that, 4 of those sires are responsible for 71% of the calves born. Sorry, back. And 2 of those are a father-son pair. So just showing you, right? If those 4 elephants are responsible for 71% of your population, we need to fix this now, especially given gestation's about 2 years long, right? We can't wait until the problem is more severe. So what do we do? So this is also an education event. So I got permission to say, I can also show you all sperm slides and other reproductive aspects of elephants. So I'm just going to show you when we look at bull fertility, I'll talk about this a bit, but we go around and help train teams and elephants for voluntary semen collection. So none of these elephants have to do this. They voluntarily go into an area where we can safely collect them. And so just to show you, this is a good sperm sample on top. Can you play that slide for me? Or did you already? So you see those are individual sperm cells. They're moving all over the slide. That's good motility. So that's what you want to see. I will tell you, I get this question a lot. Are elephant sperm cells really large? Actually, they're tiny. They're one of the tiniest of all mammalian species, which is just interesting. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just showing you what we're seeing in most of the population is a low volume, low motility. If those sperm cells can't swim up the track, it can't fertilize the egg. So there's the female problem of most females not being cycling, and then there's obviously the male problem of having low motility, low quality samples. One of the solutions, quickly, was to bring in elephants from Africa, right? We won't go into all of the details of this, but in 2016, 17 elephants were brought from Africa to help with this population issue. This is what that looks like, right? A lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of resources. So that's just one elephant. I think I have a pointer here somewhere. I don't want to press something I shouldn't, but the elephant is in that large crate on top. You can imagine the resources that go into moving one elephant. This is just showing them getting onto the truck in Africa, numbering them to try to keep them in family groups, which is important. This is where I'd like to take this. So 17 elephants were imported. Taking that process, those are 17 embryos. Those are not elephant embryos. But my goal in this is how do we bring genetics, unique genetics, into the US to increase our population and start fresh with what we know about elephant management? This is a better way. So you could have hundreds of genetics in this blue tank. This is called a dry shipper. I can bring this on an airplane with me, which is amazing. Can put it in the luggage. The straws are semen straws. So that's a bunch of different males represented. So instead of having to bring the airplane one elephant at a time, wouldn't it be better maybe going this direction? Now people say, why would you do that? You're playing God, right? This is what I was called to do. Everybody has a different role in this. And if I can bring reproductive technologies to help elephant populations, that's what I want to do. I realize this is just a tool, right? Overall, we want elephants to breed naturally, both in the wild and in zoos. But until we get there, what can we do? We've made this problem, so what can we all do to fix it? And this could be part of the solution. This is just looking at what those samples look like. So these are hundreds of straws in liquid nitrogen vapor. It can last hundreds of years. So even past the lifespan of an elephant, if we want those genetics later, you can thaw the straw, use it for artificial insemination, which is just amazing. So even if we don't think we're going to use it now, we can collect it now, preserve it. Just like cattle, horses, livestock industry, this should become commonplace as a method, as a tool. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because you're probably wondering who I am talking about all this crazy stuff. So I'm from Nebraska, born and raised. I'm in a small farming community. I went to the University of Nebraska for my master's degree. I was actually working at a local zoo, managing their reproductive department while I was doing my master's. I was actually working on pigs because there happens to be a lot of pigs in Nebraska. And then, I did that for several years. I really wanted to make a difference in how reproductive biology could change, could help endangered and threatened species. I heard you should go to the Smithsonian, but I was from Nebraska. I didn't really want to go, and then just over the years, just like you have to, be the change you're supposed to be here. And so I actually packed up my cats and sold everything I owned and went to the Smithsonian just to intern. So just worked there for a couple years, got my foot in the door, and then ended up doing a PhD project there. So Smithsonian has a collaboration with George Mason University. I talk about education a lot because this is near and dear to my heart, because there really isn't a path for people like myself. And so my goal is to bring others with me and to make a path for other students interested in this field. So through that then, obviously there's a lot of elephant organizations on there. I studied elephants at the Smithsonian. So I'm very highly involved in Southern Africa, serving on different boards for elephant health and conservation, and then started a program called For Elephants, which I'm going to talk about today. So I also have a private company. So it turns out I thought funding for elephant conservation would be easy. I was largely mistaken. And my heart goes out to people and my fellow colleagues working on species that don't have this charismatic figure all the time. Thank you for your efforts and your heart, because you're probably thinking, oh, elephants have all the funding. They don't, at least not in the science realm. But I know what it takes, how much effort goes into that, and they all deserve our attention. So I started a private company to help the other species besides elephants, and this is actually the major donor to For Elephants right now. And so you can see we work with a lot of endangered, critically threatened animals throughout the US and in Africa as well. And so these are some of my colleagues from Brazil, from Africa. So we're a global company, and that's important to me as well, because this is a global issue. So yeah, this is an African lion. So Kari, thank you for this gorgeous photo. So it started here. So at the Smithsonian, I couldn't just jump into, it's very naive to think I could just jump into elephants because I like them. So they had a project characterizing testosterone for the first time in African lions. So I worked on that project for the first year with Dr. Buddha. And so that's what kind of got me into the door. So I have a soft space in my heart for the big cats, and that's how it started. While I was there, I met Dr. Janine Brown, who is well known in elephant reproduction. So I spent 7 years at the Smithsonian National Zoo Conservation Biology Institute studying elephant reproduction and trying to dig into the question of why are most female elephants of reproductive age not cycling. So I studied wildlife endocrinology. So endocrinology is just the study of hormones. So this can be reproductive, which we normally think of, but this is stress, this is metabolic, this is diet. Hormones run your life, as we probably all are aware. So even all the nutrition hormones affect reproduction. So this is what I've studied for many years and developed different ways to study animals non-invasively, which means instead of necessarily having to get blood from an animal, we develop techniques to just grab their poop samples, and you can tell a lot about an animal's health just by their fecal samples. This is relevant when we get to Africa because it's really difficult, impossible, to just go collect blood from all of these elephants in the savannah. So instead, we can follow them and collect fecal samples because elephants poop a lot. So we can test in fecal samples, you can do urine, you can do saliva samples. When I started this, I had some zoos send me some fecal samples, and I didn't specify you just needed a small bag like that. And so I would get these giant 50-pound boxes, and I'm like, okay, that was not what I meant. So now we have a nice process of sending fecal samples. From there, they go into, it's called an enzyme immunoassay. So these are specific for different hormones that you're looking at. It's a color change. So depending on the intensity of the darkness, that will tell you the concentration. I won't go into all the details. Put it into a machine, and it gives you a result. Sounds easy, but there's about 11 years to go into that, but we'll skip that. In general, this is what it's telling us. So we have an endocrinology lab set up in South Africa to give data on wild elephants as well. So one of my questions was, okay, we have the zoo metric. What does it look like in the wild? Our goal point should be healthy animals. If all of our health is skewed, we shouldn't be using, an unfit reproductive population for our baseline. So this is what we're looking for. I won't go into all the details, but an elephant only cycles 3 times a year, which means they only have 3 potential times to get pregnant. Again, I'm very patient. So this is long-term monitoring. So elephant health, you have to monitor all the time. Toledo Zoo is one of the zoos that sends in samples every week, and we know the health and reproductive status of all their elephants at any moment. It's phenomenal. This is non-cycling, obviously. So if you can't cycle, you can't conceive. I'm not going to really geek out, but just showing you this is what we're looking at. On the ovary, there's a structure after an egg is released once every 3 months. That spot is called the corpus luteum on the far right in the yellow. It secretes the progesterone. That's the hormone I'm looking at to look for cycling status. If she didn't ovulate, there's no corpus luteum, no progesterone. So my question at the Smithsonian from Dr. Brown was, can you help me figure out why these elephants aren't cycling? Elephants are so dynamic. When any of you get the opportunity to come to Africa with me, which you will have the opportunity, you'll see it's just not one thing, right? It's not one hormone. It's temperature, it's weather, it's nutrition, it's weight, it's social. Social is one of the biggest factors that affects elephant reproduction. And management. People are drawn to these elephants are drawn to their caretakers. All these things have to be considered. I started to ask the question, are elephants obese? And everybody's like, what? Elephants are supposed to be fat. They're big, right? How do you tell an obese elephant? And so this was my question, is excess body fat or obesity a risk factor for reproduction in elephants? Obviously in humans, we're used to this BMI, that number none of us like to look at. So I use that model, obviously from humans, and in cattle, it's a common thing. Cattle, it's visual, so you can look at this index and tell the health relatively in terms of body fat for cattle. So I used that idea. In elephants, I knew it had to be practical, had to be inexpensive, and it had to be easy to use. If I just did a fancy fat test, who was going to be able to interpret that? If I want this in every zoo and every field site in Africa, it had to be a visual aid that was validated with scientific data. So I started to looking at photos and going to zoos. And I quickly saw that I didn't get a lot of diversity in the zoo elephant photos. Again, no blame, we are where we are, and now we make change. So I just didn't get a good enough data set to see where were these elephants putting on body fat. So this is when I started going to Africa more intensely. Don't tell my mom, but the first time I went there to study elephants, I bought a one-way ticket, I waitressed on the side, made enough money, got there, and figured out my way home later. And so I knew I needed wild elephant populations. So my question was, let's develop this index based on both zoo populations and wild populations and see if this is potentially a problem. So again, our study population was large, so about 50 and 50 in both sides. I knew, I have a degree in biostats, so this was important to me. They said, you're crazy, that's a lot of numbers. I'm like, yes, but this is pretty important. So we went to South Africa, partnered up with my dear colleagues at Elephants Alive, who I still partner with today. They actually have a database of photos for elephants from years and years, so it started the process, which is amazing. So shout out to them. I quickly found out where animals deposit body fat. Obviously, looking at a thin elephant is easier to see. I won't go into all this. At the end of 7 years, it seems kind of like heartbreaking to think after 7 years I came up with a 5-point system, but there was a lot to it. I won't go into details, we can definitely share this, but went through and look at where animals deposit, where elephants deposit fat. and found out we want to aim for this body condition 3. I will tell you, when you go to a zoo or anywhere, you want to see a hip bone, that's normal. Don't alarm the teams that the elephants are underfed, that's perfect. So go take a look at Renee, go take a look at Twiggy, they look amazing. You'll see a hip bone, that's what you want to see. And if you want, there's an online training course for that, if you're interested. So looking at our population then in Africa and in the zoos. So you have your captive population in the light gray, and then your free ranging in the dark. And at no surprise, the most prevalent score for our zoo elephants was a 5, which we considered obese. And the most prevalent condition score in our wild population was a 2. So obviously a stark difference. Interestingly, these rates of excessive body fat in our zoo-managed elephants were the same as human obesity, which was just, maybe, and same as pets. So maybe we were treating them kind of like pets, right? It makes sense. But the bigger deal was when I studied longer in Africa, so I go there multiple times a year and have a team over there, and actually Toledo Zoo is helping support some of that team in the future, which is amazing, and started now. So these elephants are both body condition 5. You can tell which one's in the wild and which one is at zoo. This was years ago. But 5 is also normal in the wild. This is important. An elephant shouldn't stay at the same level of body condition throughout the year. The difference is in Africa, that body condition 5 elephant will go back to a 2 because of resource availability, right? The body condition score 5 elephant in the zoo likely will stay there. That's when you have problems. So the key is variability in body condition throughout the year. So we work with teams to promote seasonal feeding in zoo populations because all those hormones, both the nutrition and reproductive, are from the one tiny gland the size of a pea in your brain. So they talk to each other all the time. And if that communication starts going dull, they don't respond anymore, right? So you have to keep them activated. So you have to switch up the feeding to activate those reproductive hormones. So at the end of the study, we did a large study with all the zoo elephants. We found that a body condition score 5, not surprisingly, is 3 times more likely to be non-cycling. So we had our answer that this was an issue in zoo-managed elephants. So I'm fairly, motivated, passionate about this. So I'm like, okay, let's find out which hormones then, right? So I'm not going to go into the details of this, but then we looked at all the metabolic hormones related to this. So just like I use humans and cattle and livestock and equine as a model, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel here. And sure enough, we found markers of leptin, insulin, and glucose were all related to African elephant reproductive issues, the same as we see in other species. I'm going back to this now. So this is a statement and a guideline from the AZA Zoo Elephant Advisory Group that it was common if your elephant didn't have a calf by 24, they should be out of the breeding population. It made sense at that time because they had complications with births and miscarriages. But then they had a statement that all factors should be taken into consideration, right? So my goal then was look at all these elephants, regardless of age, to look at these hormones now that we have markers to see if some of that population could come back into the breeding population, right? So if we're excluding any elephant over 24, going to Africa and you'll see elephants are having calves, as early as 8 up to 60, sometimes more. So when I see 24, I kind of want to pass out, like I almost did yesterday. But I'm like, instead of doing that, let's just fix it. Let's just have some dialogue around it and see if we can improve. So that's what we did. We looked at Renee's metabolic hormone. She was over that 24. She had previously calved. It's been a while ago. So shout out to Jeff, giving the approval for this and having vision of changing the status quo. He had to be a leader and getting, of doing this and saying, hey, let's look at her. Let's do a full comprehensive exam and only do what's best for her, number one, and then also helping the population. And I'll tell you, that is what Toledo Zoo does, right? They may not have a ton of elephants, right? They don't have the space for it, but they use every inch of that space and their resources and the scientists to do everything they can. And so they are leaders, and other places are doing this now. And of course, Kirka is a result of that. That only happened because I was able to use that data from Africa. So I've been studying those elephants over, about 20 years now. And so I'm not showing all of that, but I do have now markers of all those hormones from a biobank in Africa. So I knew what we should be aiming for. And Toledo Zoo, took that data and said, let's do this. So that's amazing. So these are my 2 first employees. So 4 elephants started based on, I thought zoos would just end up paying for this because it's amazing. Turns out they didn't necessarily budget for it. So I said, I'm going to raise the money because every elephant deserves this care. We started For Elephants right when COVID hit. So, I had a space set up a zoo to do this work, and that closed down. So I said, okay, we're going to move some of this lab equipment to my basement. And so this is my basement, and this is how For Elephants started. And those are my daughters, Scarlett and Gianna. So to process a fecal sample, they send the fecal sample, we weigh it, you have to crush it. So right now they're using, I didn't have fancy equipment, so we went to the kitchen and got a rolling pin, and they're crushing the fecal samples that we then ran in the basement. So it turns out you can get shipments of elephant fecals or semen right to your doorstep in a residential area. So, so the basement became our first center. So from this, we were able to, this is one of the elephants from that first 16 that came from Africa. So I said, what a unique opportunity to look at, we have wild elephants here. So raised all the money to monitor all the elephants that came from Africa to get African elephant data here. So this is just showing you since 2016 when they arrived. The minute those planes arrived, I said, get the poop from the trailer, right? And so we've been monitoring those elephants ever since. And sure enough, those, I'm not gonna go into all the details, those circles are when they started to cycle, and the last where you see that hormone going up, that's pregnancy. All right, just very briefly, so this is For Elephants in 2019. Was when I did the paperwork. 2020 we got started, moved into the basement. I'm from Nebraska, and our big thing is what we do is obviously the research, the funding, the student training, and then the elephant team training too. These are kind of our main projects, and then keeping the Africa program going, not just in terms of the science, but involving people in Africa directly related to this. It's the only way it works. That's in my basement also. We've progressed. So I lived in Omaha all my life. So last year we actually just moved to Texas. So on the right, these are my girls, a little bit bigger. They're still my employees. This is their first day of school. So yeah, cats and giraffes take up a lot of our life now, which is amazing. It just was enabled me to do more of this work more quickly, to figure out more of these details of these reproductive technologies that we can apply to elephants and other species. So For Elephants, I won't read that all, but at the end of it, our mission is conservation, education. My main thing is that we always work together to live in a place where elephants always exist. I mean, it's a real possibility that there's no more elephants in zoos and no more elephants in the wild. And that is our responsibility, and I feel like that is my mission to make sure that doesn't happen. My girls go to Africa with me all the time. They see me work on this, and I would just feel like sometimes I want to quit. I'm not going to lie. I think we all get there. That's a lot. But then I just imagine if I did, they would say, Mom, you knew how to do this and you didn't do it. Why didn't you keep going? And so one day I don't want to say that, so that's why I'm here. Okay, I know I had a lot of drugs, so I'm crying. So my other big thing is I invite others to join us. I invite everybody to be in on this mission. And you say, I want to do this. How can I help? So education's a big deal. So we have graduate programs. So I have 2 PhD students. We have 3 master's students, a bunch of undergraduate students. I'm hoping to, with Jeff's help, develop this more in Toledo so that we have the next generation. It's important. I never, had that path, so I'm trying to make that path. And it's difficult but important. So they actually come to our lab and do sperm analysis, hormone monitoring. We go to the various zoos. So training. Crystal, you walked in perfect timing. You didn't know I gave you lots of shout outs, Elephant Zoo team already. But training is part of what we do. So we go into zoo programs, as like, hey, let's start from scratch and help you with the elephant side and the semen collection side and the processing side. So, we come routinely, but then after that, we want you to have the skills so you don't need us anymore, right? That's the whole goal, is you don't need us anymore. And so this is Crystal learning how to dilute the elephant semen sample after they dilute them. So we got the funding to provide like the microscopes, all the things they need. So now they have a kit there so that they can routinely collect samples and send them to our lab for storage. So we work with a lot of zoos doing this. So we go in and break it down step by step, and you can talk to Crystal if it's a good process. But this is important to us on what we do. So obviously going to a lot of different zoos, doing reproductive ultrasounds. Again, my job, I feel, is to teach others to do this. So, one day I'm not going to be here if this organization only exists on me, which right now it kind of does. And I don't want that. I want it to carry on long past my time. Part of what we do is elephant expeditions to South Africa. This is both first it was for students and scientists, and I'm like, no, let's bring community, let's bring families. And so this has opened up to people that love elephants and want firsthand to get in there and to collect those fecal samples and get into the field. I'm not going to go into a lot of it. So this is our first site. So where we're located in South Africa is we're just west of the Kruger National Park in a town called, we're outside of the town, in Hoedspruit. We like this area because we work and we're located the same location as Elephants Alive and the Black Mambas. So again, collaboration is critical to me. And so this space allowed us to monitor these elephants that are in Kruger National Park. So in early 2000s, Kruger National Park it was home of the most elephants in Southern Africa. They took down their fences, so now these elephants and all these animals have the opportunity to migrate, right? They haven't done this for years and years. And so now we have an opportunity to look at these elephant movements. So when I say this, I'll get to this here. I'm going to go back here one second. So what we can do is, here's our first endocrinology lab. And again, this is Gianni. He died last year, and he let me have this space, right, to set up our lab. So you have to start messy. Anything you do, you start messy. I think all my colleagues agree. So right there, I have the first fecal sample. Like, I don't have a stool. I'm on the ground processing this elephant sample. My daughter, Scarlett, who's now 15, is on the ground there, coloring or something. And this is just how you start. It's not fancy, but from this, we were able to get data, right, which changed the fate of elephants. So this is where we started, some of my team. So this is part of the Elephants Alive crew that I work with. So through that, they collar elephants. So we collar elephants, and that way we can monitor and track them. What that does is, if we know where these elephants are and go out to monitor them, at that same time, the team will collect the fecal samples for the hormones. So now we have long-term data to say, what are the reproductive hormones? What do they look like over time in wild elephants? And actually, we just published that paper. I'm sure Jeff can share that with you all, to look at the first time this long-term study of elephants. And this was a big deal as those boundaries came over and looking at stress levels, right? Stress can be good, but there's negative stress, and we're finding certain areas. I'll talk about Mozambique project coming up here. He said, perfect. The fence is down, they can go to Mozambique, they can migrate, they can get new genetics in. The problem was, Mozambique is a high poaching area, and the elephants knew it. So the minute they wouldn't cross that barrier, right? And the minute they did, family members got poached. So do you think any of those elephants would go past that boundary anymore? No, they're smart, they're family oriented, they talk to each other. But we knew that going into Mozambique for new genetics and just space and resources was critical. So what can we do? So we took on a project, which we're doing now, I'll talk about a little bit more, is the Mozambique Corridor Project. Can we make a safe zone for these elephants to feel comfortable enough to pass? At the same time, can we involve the communities to make sure that that corridor stays safe and also gives them resources and money and income and jobs? It's a huge program. It's underway, it's working, and what we're doing on the endocrinology side is looking at that stress level of those elephants crossing that corridor. And we're at a standpoint because they don't cross. Very few, they're scared. So how to reduce that fear landscape? So this is obviously doing a collaring operation. And what we do then is collect the fecal samples. So that team currently today goes out, we know these elephants, we have long-term data, collecting these fecal samples, we run them in our lab. So you can imagine in Mozambique, though, these samples come back to the freezer in our fancy little lab. There's not refrigeration or freezers at our locations in Mozambique. So we had to get creative and came up with a way that we could, using desiccant gel and all these things, how do you get the moisture out of these fecal samples so they don't rot in a field setting? So we spent a couple years and developed a method, looking at other researchers, what they've done in the past, but developed specific for this area. So now we have a process where all the team and staff and community, whoever's on that project, they can collect the fecal samples from that corridor in Mozambique in these different locations without refrigeration. So again, you just have to think, like, the answer is never no, but how, right? So that's what we do, is make things more applicable. Opportunistically, so this is the female that we put a collar on. Typically, you collar males. Obviously, we study the females. I really wanted some females collared. She had a calf on her, so you can see her large mammary glands. And so we actually collected, that's me after I just milked the elephant, which is very difficult. But what we're doing is a milk study. Obviously, there are orphaned elephants, and the milk changes by the day almost for elephants, so they're very hard to put in a bottle, and their survival rate is very low. So can we collect milk samples and look at the composition and make something equivalent for our young elephants? So this is one of our major projects too. So again, nothing ever goes wasted, right? So we're just trying to use every opportunity to, and not for just the wild, but for zoos, right? There are cases that I'm involved in that elephants aren't always nursing. So can we make a reliable formula? That could be huge. One of the other things we do in Africa, especially bringing other scientists, zookeepers, elephant managers, elephant teams, we just go sit with elephants. This is one of the best things you can do, is just see their behavior, see how they interact, and hear how loud they are. They're so loud. The way they eat, the way they wrestle with each other and play and trumpet, and you just it gives me goosebumps, and I've seen it thousands of times, but nothing teaches you like that. You know, I bring elephant managers and keepers and they come back and the next day they're changing something in their programs based on what they saw. Some of the things you see, elephant breeding, right? This is Ronnie, my man over there, he's amazing. He's on our team and collects the fecal samples. Jeff and Shayla got to meet him and Corey met him. He's phenomenal. So he goes, collects fecal samples whenever he can, opportunistic for me. So this is just showing you the area that we're working in mostly, but we go all over Southern Africa. So it used to be South Africa, now it's Southern Africa, because obviously this Mozambique project is one of our majors. We also go into work in Botswana, Zimbabwe as well. This is our new space. So this is the collective space that we use for Elephants Alive and for elephants. Our lab is actually a small little lab in the back there, which actually we need to expand. We're working on that. But that's just a bit of our location. So you probably recognize two very important people in this room that are dear to my heart. Jeff, shout out to Jeff and Shayla. They said, we want to see. And I think they quickly saw that conservation and setting up this kind of operation in Africa, in Southern Africa, you think this is easy. It's very civilized. There's things. It's hard. Jeff, would you agree? There's a lot of changes. This is the Black Mamba group. They're an all-women anti-poaching group. They also live on site where our lab is. And so my goal, too, is to train them in the lab, right? And some of them are just like, I want to learn. But if we can give that structure for in-country, I think that's one of the best things we can do, is involve the local people and give them skills as well. So shout out again to Shayla and Jeff for going on this journey and seeing what this is like. And they're going to definitely play a more active role in this going forward, and I'm so thrilled. This is part of our team. Henry, I'm almost done here. So Henry next to me, I don't know whose smile is bigger there, but he's one of our elephant shepherds. So he goes out. So elephant-human conflict is real. We've all heard of it. And we're changing the dialogue. So instead of human-elephant conflict, now it's human-elephant coexistence. So every time we know that we call it conflict, but that's from the human perception, right? We need to figure out a way to live with these elephants. So they get calls. Henry gets a call that there's an elephant going into a village, a surrounding community. He gets on his little motorbike with his arsenal of how to get this elephant out of this area. Now you think this would be complicated and very complex. This is chili powder-filled eggs. This is paintball. This is things you don't want to hurt the elephant. I mean, he says these elephants are his friends. He wants to save them, to deter them, but not hurt them. And so I always thought, all these crazy, complicated systems. No. And if his motorbike doesn't work that day, they don't go. So this is important to us to figure this out, better ways and sustainable ways, and to empower people that the elephants are their friends to coexist. And I will tell you one part on this. This is not just a population problem, but individual problem. So we were talking with one of my colleagues that it's not necessarily what works in one area will work in everything. So beehives are a common deterrent for elephants. So you'll put up beehives along the areas between the communities and elephants. Elephants hate bees. Now these are African bees, so they have quite a sting. Elephants are terrified of them. So for a long time, Dr. Lucy King did this research and found that if you put these beehives out, the elephants will go away from the communities. Then we found out the humans don't like the bees. That makes sense. And so then it was found out that the sound of the bees was enough to scare them, right? So using video stereos and things. Well, then we found out those devices like to get stolen. And so again, you have this reoccurring thing, like what's sustainable, what's not expensive, and what helps the community and the elephants. And what works in one place won't work in another, right? Some places, the forest elephants, those videos or those sounds won't work because that stuff isn't necessarily waterproof, right? So you have to think. So it made me think too that a lot of their calls are individual elephants. So it's not just a population thing, sometimes it's just a handful of elephants. So can we study, which we're doing now, these individual elephants to see what deters them individually? Or more, what takes them away from there and gives them a better opportunity somewhere else? So this is just, all right, I have 2 slides left. So this is our big project now with Mozambique Corridor Project and stress mapping. So now with all of our cortisol data, we're looking at where elephants are most stressed and why. So we're finding out, obviously, high poaching areas, these elephants are stressed. Stress affects reproduction. Right? So if we can find a way to mitigate the stress in these areas, perhaps reproduction will improve. We're using this always thinking of zoo elephants, right? So it's always connected. So right now we're looking at the Mozambique Corridor Project of what is that stress level, and over time, what are the different mitigating things we're doing in that area to reduce that stress so those elephants feel safe to cross. And this is, I will tell you, the map on the left, all those little green areas are isolated populations. You think of Africa as this wild, savanna with all these roaming elephants. It is not. These are small zoos, I have to say, managed populations. I don't care if it's a zoo or if it's a reserve. Some of these reserves have 1 elephant, right? So the same things and same principles apply across. So how do we manage those elephants? That they get unique genetics. And that's where the reproductive technologies come in. That's how do we work with coexistence with farmers. That's how do we coexistence with different zoos. So it's all related. So one day, I would love this corridor. Like perhaps it will be called the Toledo Zoo Elephant Corridor. Wouldn't that be cool? But I want this corridor to have, a large impact as a model. If you do it once, it doesn't, it's important, but it has to be repeatable. If we can take the most severe case and make it work, we can repeat this model all over Africa, not just for African elephants, but Asian as well. The last part in this is what that has done is opened up opportunities. I spent 20 plus years in Africa studying elephants. What that has done is it's also opened opportunities to help other critically endangered animals. You can't see well on this, but we're doing a semen collection on a sable antelope. I'm bringing this in because it's all connected. If we have the resources and the connections and the colleagues in one place for elephants, we should be utilizing that same collaboration to help other species as well. So this for elephants is for all animals. Elephants are the icon of this, but by doing this, we are helping so much in terms of people as well. Okay, so with that, thank you all for your patience and listening to me. I'm very passionate about this. To the Toledo Zoo for everything you've done so far, and I really look forward to things we're doing in the future. And the community here. I've heard amazing things, and I see it in this room. And I want you to be invited and along on this journey, and we'll tell you more about how you can do that. So thank you for your time, and just please be on this journey with us and see what can happen year by year. I'm not going away, so thank you all. I was using.
Thank you, Kari. That was amazing. It's some incredible work, and it's a great partnership between both 4 Elephants and the Toledo Zoo and other zoos here. Next up, we're going to start our talks looking at some of the development opportunities we do with growing conservationists and zoo professionals for the future. Next up is a project that I think is incredibly powerful, and I will give props to who's due. This was Dr. Matt Cross's brainchild, looking at ways to get students out into the field and get skill sets developed. And so we have investing in future conservation careers, our Project Turtle here at the zoo with Dr. Matt Cross and Daviana Smith.
Thank you. Dave's going to join me here in a minute. We just figured I'd let her sit down while we were waiting. So my name is Matt Cross. I'm our Director of Vertebrate Conservation. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project that is very near and dear to my heart. I realized that I forgot a lot of slides because I did this at the 11th hour. But kind of the reason we got here is I wanted to try to provide opportunities for students in high school to be able to participate in conservation programs. My high school was a very poor inner city high school. I started off my freshman year with over 300 students, and we graduated about 125. And so my school actually doesn't exist anymore. The structure is still there, but it shut down after years of declining test scores. We always did way, way lower than the rest of the state in terms of all of our testing, our state testing. And so that was kind of my motivation once I got into the real world to try to find opportunities to engage students, get them interested in education, conservation, and to help us move the dial forward in terms of our field work and stuff. So these are some of the faces of the interns we've had over the years. I lost count. We've done 4 years of this, and I think we're close to 20 students. I'd have to go back and count. I don't have everyone up here because, to be honest, a lot of people like to make goofy faces when you put a camera on them, so not all of them are up here. But we have seen a lot of students go through this program, and it's been very impactful, and I'll show you some of that here today. So I like video games, so I like to think of things in terms of video games. Some of you may not recognize this one in particular, but when we talk about getting anyone interested in conservation, there are a lot of barriers facing people. And these run the gamut from very introductory things like low wages. And let's say you are a glutton for punishment and your dream job is to, work in conservation, right? It's not a glamorous job. It's no one's get-rich-quick scheme, but it's something we're very passionate about. But if that's what you want, then we start to have other obstacles. So timing and scheduling. Not everyone can take off work for a summer to go work someplace for 3 months and chase rattlesnakes, help turtles, look at deer, that kind of thing. And because there's things that are given up. These two, the financial side and the scheduling, a lot of this comes down to opportunities you can have and opportunities lost, especially if transportation and where my finances go are issues. So all of these factors that contribute, that are part of our conservation field, act as barriers, and they might not always be apparent to a lot of us, because things like these time spent in the field and time that you give up on jobs, right? You can come work for me for $12 an hour, or you can go to McDonald's and make $17 an hour, right? You can go be a bagger at Kroger or Meijer, things like that. And so there are when we look at this, there are a lot of barriers standing in anyone's way trying to enter this field. And this can be insurmountable, especially to people who may not have reliable transportation, who have different financial statuses than ourselves. And then even down here with the qualifications and knowledge, I'm gonna level with you. I was rarely an A student. I did great in high school, but college is a different story. I lost my scholarship my freshman year. I think I ended up with a C in biology, and then I got a PhD in it. So perseverance and determination is great, but just because you're not the best and brightest doesn't mean you can't make a contribution to this field. And so one of the most important things that I've discovered going on this journey is really trying to remove barriers without creating more. So many times I've seen these misguided efforts of people thinking that they're providing someone a bridge to get someplace, and in reality, it just creates more problems, right? So an example I have of some of our partners that are here today would be offering, these, okay, we're gonna bring in people who from different financial backgrounds by saying, you can release fish for free. well, you still have to get transportation there. People from different financial backgrounds might have to work around the clock, right? So it just some of these efforts of saying, let's just do this, don't always work. Another great one is conferences. I like to pick on those because a lot of conferences are promoting inclusion and trying to get people to come to these places, right? Well, conferences, they cost money, right? So if you want to have students come to your conferences, you can't charge $500 a pop. You can't have it in a major city, and you can't have it at a 5-star hotel. So that's why venues like this are really great for high schoolers and getting people involved and seeing some of this science and some of this conservation in action because of these barriers we've removed. And so with this in mind, we started this project here at the Toledo Zoo trying to get high school students from our local schools interested in conservation and giving them some experience. Oh, how do we get to this point? So the objectives of this project were very, very simple. A lot of times as scientists, we have a list of objectives that are a page long. It's easy, right? If we want to get people involved, provide the opportunity. We want to increase representation in our workforce and provide people with these opportunities. So give them paid positions. I'm a huge advocate for paid internships. Students, if you're looking at this, and someone will yell at me later, but don't do anything for free if you can all avoid it. And then really, we wanted to evaluate our program's success by looking at the impact that we had on these students, right? So we do pre and post surveys so that we can look at this under, as a conservationist, what I call an adaptive management approach. So we go through, we do this program once, and we say, okay, here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong. Let's go back and tweak it so we can make this a better experience overall. So we took our list of barriers for students entering this field, and we went, again, approached it from this adaptive management strategy. And so in terms of finances, we applied for grants to create these internship positions, and then we take care of most of those barriers. So they're paid. We also provide students with lunches and PPE, or all the equipment that you'd need to be in the field with us. Waders, boots, hats, backpacks. So there's no costs out of pocket. Season and scheduling. So one of the biggest issues that we run into annually is our field season starts in April. High school students in particular don't really get out until June. And so what we do is we wait for the student portion to start until June. My regular crew, my college students, start in April, but we leave positions open for the interns. And then we also provide flexible scheduling. So if you have familial obligations, babysitting, watching relatives, or even work schedules, sports, that kind of thing, we work around schedules, and we make sure that they're flexible. And then transportation. So it can be a limiting factor. So if requested, we'll provide transportation to and from work. And I really can't overemphasize how unique this is. As someone who spent a lot of time in academia, when we're giving students transportation to and from work each day, in our big years where a lot of students need transport, that can be an hour on the front and back of each day. So that's 2 hours of lost field work. My academic colleagues cannot fathom that. They cannot get around the idea of losing data, right? Because we're giving people a ride to and from work. But we are functioning as an academic institution, but we have a lot more flexibility because we're a zoo. So while I do have the whip at my back for some of these grants, we have a lot of flexibility when it comes to this and being able to accommodate this kind of support. Qualifications and knowledge. Like I said, I don't necessarily want the straight A students. If they're the ones that are best for the job, we'll take them. But if we have students that work with their teachers, and as long as they're in decent academic standing, and are not necessarily the straight A students, but they've expressed an interest and a passion in this, and the teachers feel that this will be beneficial for those students and impactful, then we will take those students. So in lieu of a traditional application process, we just have teacher recommendations. We work very closely with teachers that we've worked with for years. So I'm on the advisory board for NSTC's Wildlife and Sustainability Program, and have been since 2017. And so we work really close with our teachers so we all understand what we're doing here. And then finally, really trying to focus on this sense of scientific identity and being able to see yourself in these roles. So for a lot of students, science is lab coats and pipettes, being a gel jockey. when in reality it's very different. And so we work to try to find college student mentors who will serve as good role models. And then we started introducing a returning cohort so students can teach each other. And so you can really see yourself in this role and say, this is something that I can do and this is something that I want to do. So this doesn't happen overnight. This took a lot of planning. Like I said, I've been on the advisory board here at NSTC for years. And then what I think we did correctly, and again, I'm sorry, I'm not really tooting my own horn. I don't do a lot of things correctly, but in this case, I might have done this. We used our relationship with TPS, especially Bob Vasquez. He works for both the zoo and TPS. And we met with Superintendent Dr. Durant, and we asked them what they wanted to see out of a program like this. Because what I've seen with a lot of mistakes is when we tell people what we think they want. Let me tell you something about you that you don't know, right? So we met with them and we talked about, where they wanted to see this, how we thought we could approach this to maximize the impact on students and get students to be involved. Because they warned us that, even if you have a paid internship like this, there's chances people aren't going to show up. So how do we do that? And then we also, there's a picture that pops up there. There we go. Is there another one? Nope, hold on. We applied for some grants. So our very first round of grant funding was the Greater Toledo Community Foundation grant. They generously award us some money to get us our first 2 seasons. And then for the last 2 years, this was funded through an Ohio STE grant. And so this whole process took a while. We didn't just go in, dive in head first like I tend to do. We made sure we dotted our I's and crossed our T's to provide the best experience possible for the students. So what we did is we came up with a fun acronym. Initially this had a different name, but this is our TURTLE program, Teens Understanding Research Techniques and Learning Ecology. And what this is if you guys saw our earlier talk, or my earlier talk on Tuesday, the Toledo Zoo has a long-running turtle mark recapture program. And turtles make great ambassador animals for wildlife conservation and wildlife techniques. And so what I mean by that is, well, turtles are cute. They're charismatic. I covered that the other day. If you don't believe me, we can argue about it later. But the nice part is you can get hands-on with them, right? So if I were doing work with mammals or fragile birds, the opportunities to get hands-on and really get that experience is extremely limited because handling is a very different story. We can touch turtles. We can grab turtles. So they make a great ambassador for this. And so what we did is we integrated our turtle conservation program with our turtle field program, which is not an acronym, and I realize it gets confusing. But these students get to participate in all of our field conservation efforts that my college level employees do. They work alongside them. They are trained for a few weeks, and then they're very much as independent as possible. And they take data. They do all the same things that my staff does. And a lot of these we focus on transferable skills, right? So on the one hand, measuring a turtle, it's measuring a turtle. What does that translate into? Well, all of my technicians can read a caliper. All of my technicians can draw blood from a turtle. And if you can draw blood from a turtle, you can probably draw blood from darn near anything. Gathering data, working as a team, all these factors that are part of this program are part of this suite of transferable skills that maybe not even my students and employees realize it, but they can be used in other jobs. So a couple of things we did here, we'll look at our assessments. So we have pre and post surveys for the experiences to say, okay, what did you think about XYZ before you started this program, and what do you think now? We had a combination of Likert scale questions, which is kind of like a ranking gradient, and then open-ended questions. We also eventually added some mentor-led interviews, so teachers talking to students, and then self-assessments. So how do you think you're doing along the way? And then our main focuses in these, we're looking at 3 main factors: confidence in obtaining a job in conservation after this, knowledge of transferable skills, and again, this feeling of belonging and sense of scientific identity, that these students are the experts. They're the ones who know what they're talking about, and they belong in this field. And so after our first year, we kind of added a few things, and to make this a little bit more unique for the students. So we added some fun stuff. So we have our returning cohort. So this program was very popular, and I found that the thing I didn't expect is almost everyone wanted to come back. And so what we did is we started inviting returners back annually. So we had a returning cohort that would help teach the new students. They had most recently gone through it and could help coach them, because I've been in this for a while, and even something as simple as snake ID, there's some snakes I can tell you what snake it is without a shadow of a doubt, but that if I had to explain why, it's a little bit, it's that scale row, not this scale row. I can't keep it straight. These students have gone through this stuff more recently, and they are better equipped to teach each other. It also reinforces this idea that I can do what this person does, right? It's not them watching me, it's not them watching a college student, it's them watching a peer. This peer-to-peer or near-peer mentoring is a critical component of our program. The zoo sees around 1 million visitors annually, so we implemented tabling events. So you may have seen this with our zoo teens, where they'll sit there and they'll talk about different aspects of the zoo. My interns, they sit there and they have all of our trapping gear, right? And they talk to people about what they're doing out in the field, how to measure turtles, how to process animals, and they interact with the public. One of my favorites is we call it our Parents Trap Day. We let the students bring their friends and their friends and family out to the field with them, so their family can see them in a role they've never even imagined before, right? So these students are suddenly, they're in class, and now they're hauling 40-pound snapping turtles out of the marshes. This is absolutely amazing, and is a great way to reinforce this familial transfer of conservation knowledge, right? So maybe turtle conservation has never been part of anyone's mind, but now I see my kids doing it, and it's exciting for me, right? Because what makes them happy, what makes me happy. Same thing with my kids, Pokemon and K-pop demon hunters. I don't know what it is, but it makes them happy, so it's good. And then finally, we did an end-of-season banquet where we have the interns bring in their friends and family. We provide dinner. We all have like we bring everyone together who has helped them, their support system. We invite their teachers. We let the students pick the dinner, so it's a lot of carbs and yellow things, but it's delicious. And we do paper plate awards. We do a slideshow showing all the pictures we've gathered that summer, and just come together and celebrate. Because I think one of the things that I forget to do, I know, is celebrate our accomplishments. And so this program truly is an accomplishment for a lot of people. These students put in a lot of work during the summer. More so, my staff does a lot of work in the summer, because just as much as it is the interns, it's oversight, transport, and scheduling. So this is a massive effort, and it's important that we take time to celebrate our successes. So when we talk about this program, there are some pictures to me that summarize the impact. So you have to pardon me here. This, again, Kai hates this picture. I'm not sure Day is really thrilled with it, but she can tell you here in a minute. So Day started before Kai. This was her first year. I believe, Day, you started the day before you turned 14? Day you turned 14. So that was the earliest Day could actually work for me. Kai started a couple weeks later and knew Dave through class and volleyball. And so what we see here is a very genuine reaction on Kai's face to watching Day, a classmate that she's seen in school and volleyball, drawing blood from a Blandings turtle on her first try. That was amazing. And what I like, though, is that 2 weeks later, Kai was doing the same thing. So students learned very quickly how to do these transferable skills. So within about 2 weeks, most of them are trained to the equivalent level of a lot of my college students. Not all of them, but some of them. To the point where I've had some of my master's students say, well, why am I only making X dollars more than them? And I say, well, when you can do the job better than them, then we'll talk. And they don't really care for that, but that's neither here nor there. This is a cool experience this year. So Day is a rock star at drawing blood from turtles, and we had a colleague who has worked at E.S. George Reserve in Michigan with the longest running turtle program in existence. They've been doing market capture since the 1950s, and they had a different way of taking blood from turtles. We take it from the dorsal sinus and by the neck. They do by the tail, and we'd never seen this before. So my friend Todd came in and was showing us how to draw blood, and 3 of us were doing it, Day, Ramila, and I. Ramila and I got there eventually. Day was really struggling. I could tell it was kind of frustrating her, because this is what she does. Day can draw blood. When people can't draw blood, even my college students, they hand the turtles to Day. And so then Todd asked, he's like, well, I've never seen anyone draw blood from the back of the neck. So Day showed him and got on the first time, and you can see the look on Todd's face is This was really cool to me to have someone who's been doing this for decades teach us, and then at the same time learn from us, let alone learn from one of my interns. And so this is amazing to me. I love to see this in real time. We also have a lot of other pictures like this. I could go on for all hours of the day, but things that I take for granted. So this was Honesty's first time on a boat. She came out with us to do sturgeon. So while this is the turtle program, the interns get to work with all of the other species that I work with. So we've heard this week about turtles, snakes, copperbelly water snakes, sturgeon, all that kind of stuff. These guys get work with. Jane over here, she's holding one of our copperbelly water snakes. When Jane started, she was kind of terrified of snakes, and eventually she grew to love them. So this has been like, even if we don't have any data, to me, this program has been very successful, at least just getting students this hands-on experience, an authentic experience, and getting them involved. So if we look at our results here, we don't have very strong results because, as I say, we've been learning over the years how to ask questions. But in general, what we're looking for here are these shifts towards, in your post assessments, these boosts in confidence. And so in general, we see shifts in confidence toward their ability to apply for a position in conservation and get a job if they wanted to. This is one of my favorites. So the skills, it's kind of across the board, and this is a great example of learning how to ask questions correctly. So where is it? Use of GPS unit to navigate within the field. Everyone was pretty confident that to begin with, and then when I got out in the field with them and gave them a GPS unit, no one knew how to use it. Well, navigating with a handheld GPS is very different than navigating with your phone, which is what everyone thought I meant. And so learning how to ask questions correctly is great. The other thing is we work with a lot of satellite schools, so they have specializations. So wildlife sustainability, early college, Toledo Tech, which is not called Tech, it's called something else. And so these students have a lot of experience with this stuff in general. So being able to collect scientific data, a lot of them had experience with that. Using radio telemetry, I was really surprised. A lot of people thought they knew how to do that. But my favorite is collecting blood samples. You can see there something they have literally no experience with. We generally go from not very confident at all to, yeah, I can do this all day. Same kind of patterns we see with this feeling of inclusion, and if you're represented in the field, we see slight increases, but I think it's very much due to the fact that in TPS and in these satellite schools, they get a lot of exposure to career opportunities and the idea of fitting into these roles, and so this is something we're exploring going down the road. The returning cohort is probably one of my favorite things, and this is where we made some concessions, right? And that's why I love working at the zoo, because we had grants, and grants want to see impact, and generally impact is measured as number, right? So if you're having an impactful grant, it's 300 students, not 3. So it was really hard to have people come back into the program and be the returning cohort, because then when I'm reporting on my grants, I have to, there's not 10 new people, there's only 5 to 6 new people, because we had people who knew what they were doing come back and do training. But man, the returning cohort was so great. It's a lot less work on me, but it lets the students, again, be the teachers and learn from each other in ways that I don't fully appreciate, right? Because I talk fast, I explain things in jargon. People who've been with me, they're like, okay, this is Matt speak, I can translate, and then we can figure this out in the field. So this has been one of my favorite parts of the program. We have a tiered returning system where we try to keep students coming back. To reinforce that if you have the skills and knowledge, you're the best one for the job, right? But also to act as teachers in the field. Tabling events, I love. The students get a kind of a kick out of, because they get to interact with the general public and the zoo, and again, get to be the experts. So these are high school students that, may or may not, are interested in conservation, and now they get to talk with not just their peers, but with strangers who walk into the zoo and explain how to do what they do. And I think they enjoyed it. Well, most of them enjoyed it. The Parents' Day, again, was one of my favorites. Is just getting families out here in the field, being able to see their students in action, being able to hold snapping turtles, do things that parents had never considered, never had the opportunity to do hands-on, was absolutely amazing. We did this again this year, and the parents love it. They love to see, they love the pictures of their kids, being there firsthand, seeing them do something they never thought they would see their students do. Maybe they never even thought it was possible. And so the Parents' Day is just, it's absolutely amazing. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of other opportunities associated with this program. Well, turtles are the focus. We have a lot of other work we do, most including lake sturgeon, copperbelly water snakes, and the lake sturgeon are like this year. It was literally the first day the students started. We had to go pick up sturgeon eggs, so we drove them in the car 2 hours north, and they got to help us wrangle like 5-foot sturgeon. The copperbelly water snakes have quickly become a favorite project for the students because they get to help us with the captive care, and then they've been helping us with the releases. So our interns were part of the very first time the federally threatened copperbelly water snake had been reintroduced into Northwest Ohio. And so they got to do the releases, they got to do the raising of the snakes, rearing of the snakes, and they got to help out with the radio telemetry and the following. So this was a project they were very involved in, and everyone really loved. So what's really unique about working with some of these satellite schools is they get to take what they learn back to the classroom. So at NSTC, they up there by the Toledo Botanical Garden, they have a pond in their backyard, well, back school area. And so I gave them some traps. I actually gave them some traps that were gifted to me from Justin Cogden, the guy who had ran that the study from the 1950s. So the students didn't really appreciate it, but they were handling traps that were older than I was. But they got to go out and trap, and so we see here some of our interns, they get to go back to school and show off to their classmates. I know what I'm doing. And so the teachers commented that it was really, for some of these students, noticed a behavioral change and this perception, and that now they're the expert to not just themselves, their families, their peers. And so we've done a lot of good job of checking off boxes in terms of things we want to see for getting students to be the experts in the field and making sure we've reinforced this knowledge. And then one of the reasons that I think this has been very successful is that we aren't so in our way where we're not robots. We let the students play. And part of crafting a scientific identity is being able to maintain yourself, not just having to dress in the lab coat, be a robot, go to work every day. And so we encourage our students to be themselves, maintain their own identity while making their scientific identity. And so becoming this kind of summer family has been a great experience, and I really think has been very impactful for people. So one of the things that I think is very important about this project is that we provide authentic experiences. So this isn't just a show up and watch people do things effort, right? We want to make sure that these are impactful because people are very aware when you're just going through the motions. And so this internship program has had a large impact. It has helped us write a conservation plan for 2 states, a report for about $800,000 federal grant, data for 3 master's theses, a publication, and then we provided data for the federal listing for Blanding's turtles. It's where the Blanding's turtles are under consideration for listing under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. So data our interns collected contributed to all of these, and I haven't updated this slide in a couple years, and so there are other projects that this has been part of. And so, again, this isn't just a, hey, we play with turtles, yeah. They're actually helping us collect data that makes a difference. Something we added with our expansion from the Ohio Sea Grant was career coaching. My friend Cassie Dresser-Briggs has Success in Science career coaching. And so what we did is we offered interns 3 workshops on building a scientific brand, career exploration, and resume writing. And so this way, they've gone through our program, and now a lot of students haven't written a resume coming out of high school. So what should you include? What should you not include? How should it look? How do you write this? And this has been really nice in terms of being able to provide additional training for them because I didn't know where to write a resume or how to write a resume when I started. So we offered this last year and the year before, and hopefully we'll be able to continue this down the road. This is another one we got to do. A friend of mine and I, we run workshops on building GPS loggers for use in wildlife studies. And so we've brought that effort to our internship program. So some of these students, they go to the Toledo Tech Academy. Others they're interested in conservation, but they're more interested in engineering or something. And so what the point of this is to show them is that anyone can do this, and you don't have to just do this, trade school versus academic route. You can be interested in both and still be successful. A lot of my colleagues and I, we use technology. We're always going to have a need for the newest gadget and gizmo to make our lives easier. And so people can walk in both worlds and be very successful. So the students enjoying this, they get to make blinking turtles and GPS loggers. But yeah, it's another thing we offer in the program. So the future, it is 2025. I got to update that. So we are we're looking to expand this program. Obviously, there have been funding issues. This is the biggest limitation to this program is that it is reliant on external funds. So to make it expansive the way it has been, for the time being, for perpetuity, we are interested in, as a zoo, is supporting it in some way, shape, or form. It just might not always be 10 students at a time, right? And so trying to find external funds to get out there and bring this together, corporate endowments and corporate sponsorship would be great. We're looking at bringing other institutions and broadening this out. So I guess this is the wrong crowd for Batman fans. Anyway, at some point in time, Batman decides there should be a Batman in every city. So we would love to have the turtle program in other major cities throughout the country. So I believe we have a good model. I'm not an educator and I don't do this for a living. I just had a fun idea and the zoo let me run with it. And I think we've been very successful. And so we want to build this out and continue having an impact for students and providing these opportunities. And so that's about the end of my time here. So I want to invite Daviana up here to talk about her experience. So Day has worked for me for 4 years. She started the program as a freshman. Like I said, she started the day she turned 14. Has come back every year. And I'm actually very pleased to say that Day is attending Central Michigan University, where I got way more degrees than any one person should. It happened very serendipitously. I got a phone call one day, and Day said she was in the office of one of my former professors and asked why I'd never told them I went to CMU, and I just had never really thought about it. So it's kind of fun that that's where Day is going, and she started her freshman year, and so I just invited Day up here to, talk about her experience here with the program.
Hey guys, my name's Daviana. I am 18 years old and I am going to Central Michigan. And no, he didn't tell me he went to Central Michigan when I was doing my college search for months. But if you don't know where CMU is, if you look at the glove, it's right here in the middle of nowhere. So how did I get here to talk to all of you today? My technician, Alyssa, she drove 3 hours and came and got me yesterday. So that's how I get to talk to all of you. So I started June 6th, which is my birthday. I turned 14, and I got my work permit the day before that. I went out we had a different team then, Chrissy and all of them, and I fell 3 times in the exact same spot for 20 minutes, and it was terrible. But by the end of the day, I had a lot of fun, and I came back every single year. I also have my own set of keys. I work in the sturgeon trailer, so I was here last week or the week before that for Sturgeon Fest. If any of you guys went to that, I worked Sturgeon Fest, and I did the tours there. My teacher, Miss Kubiak, she's the one that offered up this internship to me. I go to NSTC. I graduated from there 2025. So she was like, I took her class, and she was like, I think you should do the zoo internship. And I was like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm going to stick my neck out, and I'm going to get you the job. and I was the youngest and only girl there until my friend Kai showed up. So it was great to have her there with me. But my major, I plan on graduating with, I'm majoring in EEC, Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation, so that is great. Matt wrote my letter of recommendation to CMU, of course, and I'm taking a communications class, which really helps when I do stuff like this. I know Corey, cameraman. He helped me my first time with my first interview that I did on Parent Trap Day. So that was the best day. My mom, I always tell her what I do, and she's like, I don't know if I want to do that. And she tells people, I don't know where she gets it from, because it's not me. Because I take a snake home every summer. His name is Rocco, and she's terrified of him. But so I took her and my dad out for Parent Trap Day, and they actually had a lot of fun, and it was so fun. And my mom told me, I loved it, but I'm not coming back next year. So for Parent Trap Day next year, I brought my dad again. And then for the year after that, I brought my dad again. And then this following year, I brought my dad and my boyfriend, because my mom, again, said she was not coming and she was not changing her mind about it. But she was very excited that she got to see what I did here. Here, I feel like I have a family outside of my own family. I feel supported in everything that I do, let alone college, just having people to talk to. Even my current team and my past team, Matt went to my senior night game for volleyball, so did Chrissy and Courtney. And if I would have invited my current team to my graduation party, they would have been there too, but I forgot. But so I feel like the zoo gives me a second family, and I plan on returning. I come back in the summer, and I will be working under Matt again, because he doesn't want to get rid of me for reasons like this. And I plan on getting a job at the Toledo Zoo. If not, then at another zoo. But this is my dream job, and I feel like I'm going to be successful in it because of the turtle program, and I'm very happy that I joined. So, thank you.
Now we'll be looking at another project that's been going on here at the zoo for a while that connects children with nature. It's ensuring school children can engage with nature, Project Prairie, by Dr. Alex Burns of the Toledo Zoo. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I'm very excited to talk to you about a really unique program that we have here at the Toledo Zoo called Project Prairie. I've been working on this project since I started here at the Toledo Zoo in 2017. It was a program just briefly before I started here, so it's a really, really unique program, and I'm really excited to share it with you today. So Project Prairie is a partnership that we have with our Wild Toledo department here at the Toledo Zoo. So you've heard a couple of speakers from Wild Toledo this past week talking about our conservation programs, getting involved in conservation locally. We actually started Project Prairie with just 3 schools and some really, really endeavoring teachers that were passionate about getting their students involved in nature and outdoor learning. Definitely want to shout out Mike, Dick, and Amy Boros. They were really instrumental teachers at Maumee and Perrysburg who got this program started, working with my former boss, Mitch Magnich, who also talked a little bit earlier in the seminar as well. So with those 3 schools, we actually installed prairies into the school backyards. So prairies were selected for their conservation benefits to the local environment that we'll run through here in a moment. So just some small little grant programs that got us started with those schools, and then some word of mouth. A couple of other schools started joining with their own small grants. And then a couple of years back, we had an incredible opportunity come to us through Owens Corning. They actually funded us for a 5-year program to install 10 new prairies at schools over 5 years. So we're right in the middle of that process right now, and we have 60 schools currently that have prairies in their backyards. That's a huge job for me, overseeing all of this program, in addition to all of our other school programs that we have at the zoo, but it's amazing to see the huge impact that we have here in Northwest Ohio. Project Prairie aligns with our mission here at the Toledo Zoo. So we use our prairies to get students out into nature and enjoy nature. We use our prairies to inspire students to take steps to help their local environment. Of course, Project Prairie is all about education. That's what we're talking about today, and inspiring future students to make positive ecological impacts for native species. And action. That's a really important part for me, is empowering students and teachers at these schools that are getting prairies in their backyards to give back to their community and make a difference by being stewards for these native habitats that they have in their backyard. This is a map of the prairies that we currently have in Project Prairie. So, of course, a lot of them are focused around the greater Toledo area, which is what we love to see, making an impact in our local community. But as the program expands and we're adding more schools, we've actually installed some prairies at schools up in Michigan, out to the west, kind of in near Napoleon, Ohio, and all the way down in Findlay as well. So our range for where our team for Project Prairie will travel and do these educational programs is increasing as well. So I'm going to run through some of the environmental benefits of a prairie habitat and what it is. We'll go through these pretty quickly because it's been covered a lot throughout the symposium, but this is kind of the scientific background about why we chose prairies as a habitat, and then we'll get into how our team at the zoo uses them as an educational tool. So the conservation benefits for pollinators are one of the #1 reasons why we chose to install prairies in our backyards. So we've been talking this week about bees and butterflies and the amazing services that they provide to our local environment. So these prairies are like little refueling stations for them. The more and more pocket prairies that we have in Toledo, so most of these prairies are about 1/4 acre. This allows the monarch butterflies and bumblebees to be able to travel throughout our area and find places that they can find shelter and food. And they don't have to go too far to find them anymore because we have 60 prairies that we're working with. So this is an incredible opportunity to increase pollinator populations and connect students to these amazing creatures that live right in our backyard. An important reason why prairies and the educational background of these is talking about native species. A lot of people decorate their backyards with ornamentals. They look nice, but what our Project Prairie and our prairie habitats are focused on is native plant species. So we all know that native plant species are way more effective at providing food and nectar resources for our local pollinators than any exotic plant species will be. So these are what we call host plants, and we're teaching these to our students. Our host plants are going to attract the most type of insects, and we have a wide variety of them that are shown to be super hosts. So our black-eyed Susans and Coreopsis and milkweed, those are all going to be really effective host plants for our native insects. And those are what's part of our seed mix that was expertly created by our conservation team at the zoo. So again, pairing our expertise through education and conservation. All right, some of the other benefits of a prairie, we have our migratory birds. So most of you, if you live in Northwest Ohio, will know that this is a huge spot for migrating birds, especially twice a year. We get an influx of tourism coming to see all of our migrating birds. So our prairies are a really important aspect of providing a unique habitat for certain birds that might not have that habitat well represented here in Ohio, because prairie habitat has historically been removed. It's a very easy thing to remove for parking lots and city structures, so bringing a lot of that habitat back for these birds. Birds require tons and tons of insects to feed their young, so again, having this space where they can find feeding resources for them is super important. All right, and the next one is regarding climate change. So prairies have a really important impact on climate change as well. So climate change, the background of that is carbon dioxide. So that's the main kind of key buzzword that we have when we talk about climate change, is that carbon dioxide extant or extra amounts of carbon dioxide are getting into our environment. That is causing a thickening of our atmosphere, and heat is getting trapped underneath. So it's not just the warming of the planet underneath, but all of the changes in weather patterns that we see. We see that right now in October in Toledo, all the changes that are happening due to climate change. So these prairie roots, and I think we've seen this diagram earlier in the symposium as well. Prairies have these amazing root systems that can go up to 15, 16 feet deep into the ground. So they are what we call sequestering, or taking that carbon out of the atmosphere. So plants take in oxygen, or take in carbon dioxide, release oxygen through photosynthesis. So that's one of their main things. The bigger the plant, the more photosynthesis they are able to do. And these plants, as they're creating their roots, are storing that carbon dioxide in the ground. And some prairie plants are as effective at doing that as some trees are as well. So this is a really great benefit of having a prairie in a schoolyard, is kind of offsetting some of that carbon output. In the winter, we actually do a program in the education department called Polar Bears and Prairies, where we're connecting our polar bears that we love here at the Toledo Zoo to the prairies. Sometimes students are surprised, how would a prairie help a polar bear? A polar bear can't eat a prairie, right? They can't find food there. But by taking that carbon in and reducing the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere, we're indirectly helping the polar bears, even though they live thousands of miles away. So we can connect to see our polar bears at the zoo virtually and talk to them about how their prairie is helping polar bears. Along those same lines, those prairie roots are going to reduce upkeep. We're going to have to mow the land less, so we're using less gasoline. We're also reducing runoff, so rainwater, soil export. As rain comes over the ground, it is taking nutrients and soil from our exposed land, particularly where we have short grasses, that erosion can happen and get nutrients and other pollution into our waterways. So these really long prairie roots kind of keep everything all put in place. So we use this standard when we're learning about soil in certain grade levels, like 4th grade, learning about erosion and soil. This is a really great connection to make, that their prairie is helping to reduce erosion, which is a really big deal here in Toledo as well. We have algae blooms sometimes that happen in our waterway systems. These prairies are going to help reduce that runoff and hopefully prevent those kind of catastrophic events from happening as often. All right, a couple more ones here. So a food source for our local animals, prairie food webs. So this is a really big topic that we talk about in schools. 5th grade students in particular are learning about how energy is transferred through their environment. So we have now a real life example of this energy transfer, and they're not just looking up at the board and their teachers writing the arrows on the board. They're not just looking in their textbooks, but we can go outside right now into their prairie in their backyard and see examples of the food web in real life. So we have our producers, our plants at the bottom of the food chain. They're going to go out and be able to catch insects that are herbivores that are eating those plants. And hopefully over time, as their prairie matures, they're going to attract these higher level predators like hawks, snakes, even foxes to come to their prairie and find food. So speaking of foxes, this is a photograph that was actually sent to me by a teacher. Anyone see what's hiding in there. Yeah, a little fox. So this is a little fox in broad daylight that was captured on a trail camera. This picture was actually taken right around the corner at Beverly Elementary, which is a downtown Toledo school. This is not one of our rural schools. This is a downtown Toledo school, and they had a fox running through their prairie in the very first year. This is also a first-year prairie. We typically tell schools to be patient, that their prairie is going to take a couple years to grow, but even in the first year, this was already attracting wildlife, so the students were really excited to see this. And again, reinforcing that food web. We can talk about what that fox is trying to find to eat and all the impacts it might have on their environment. So that was pretty fun. Beauty, right? So we spend a lot of time landscaping our schoolyards. Schools spend a lot of money mowing their lawn, keeping up their front appearance. So adding a prairie is an inexpensive way for them to add some variety to their landscape and make it look incredible, especially during the fall season when everything is in bloom. So I love to show these pictures of our prairies. All right, finally, habitat. So we've talked a lot about the habitat that is attracting these native species. We're hoping that our prairies taken in whole, we have acres and acres of them now, that we are making an impact on providing habitat for our local endangered species. We've been hearing about them in the symposium all week. So not just our prairie species that might actually be found in our prairie, some of our butterflies, Karner blue that was chatted about, frosted elfin. We would love to see those start to repopulate our area if they can find the habitat. But again, as we just talked about, our water animals are really benefiting from these prairies due to the reduced erosion and cleaner waters that we're getting from our prairies. All right, so we ran through the ecological benefits of a prairie, why we do it, the great connections that we can start to make for conservation topics with our students. Now I'm going to get more specific about our student engagement and what we actually do in Project Prairie for our students and building future conservation leaders. So we try to engage the students in Project Prairie from day one. So when a school signs on, we give them the incredible news that they can have a prairie that's funded by Owens Corning. They're gonna come out with us right away and they're gonna help us plant that prairie so that they have that buy-in and that ownership. The thing I love about planting a prairie is that, I didn't know this before I worked here, but you actually plant the prairie in the wintertime. That helps the seeds to activate, break out of their seed coat, and go through something called scarification, which is like basically breaking out of their seed coat. So I like it. I don't know if the students love it as much. They're usually bundled up and coming out with us, having a great time in the snow, throwing snowballs, and they're spreading their seeds on the ground. They're sprinkling them on top of the snow even, and those seeds are gonna go down into the ground and start building their new prairie. We use that as a learning opportunity as well. We're bringing out our big chart of the plant roots so they can see how their tiny seeds that they're planting are gonna grow into these big 16-foot long prairie plants. Warmer weather comes in the spring. We go out and, as was mentioned in some of the prairie talks, in order to get our prairies to grow a little faster and get those more instant results, we add plugs so that we get that growth in the first year. So again, this is not our conservation team going out. They're gonna select the plants for us, but our team, the education team, brings out the flats of plants and gets those students hands-on in the ground planting these things. You'd be surprised that a lot of these students, especially our city students, have never done this before. So we have to tell them that the roots go down and not up, and help them to get those plants in the ground. But it's really, really fun. I love going out and doing plugging with the students in the spring as well. And then typically, especially through our grant-funded schools, but we also have schools that continue to have us out each year, we don't just end our engagement with them by planting their prairie. That would be pretty irresponsible of us. We're going to continue to engage them throughout the process. So we're doing outreach programs. We've developed outreach that is grade level specific from K through high school. So each year they're doing a unique experiment or exploration that is unique to their grade level standards and hits on scientific inquiry. So all of our programs through Project Prairie are what we call inquiry-based. Inquiry is very student-led, It's meant to get students asking their own questions and gathering data to answer the questions that they come up with. In educational research, we've talked a lot about science research this week. My background is in education, so in educational research, inquiry comes up time and time again, project-based learning as the best way to have students have ownership, and they're gonna learn that stuff way better when they're in control of it, and when they're asking the questions and when they're going through this process than they are gonna be by lecture or just talking to them. So it's really important to me that we base all of our Project Prairie and our other zoo educational opportunities in inquiry and project-based learning. Another really important step, we love engaging with the students, but it's really important to us that we're empowering teachers to join us in this process of conservation and environmental education. We get to see the students maybe once or twice a year through our outreach programs. These teachers are with their students every single day. So every new school that comes into Project Prairie gets a day with us to explore the prairie and get more accustomed to using it as a scientific resource. So these are some photos from some of our professional development. Again, similar to the students I described earlier, you'd be surprised how many teachers are really freaked out by even having a butterfly on them or picking up a bug, and even just overcoming that obstacle so that they aren't afraid to provide that opportunity to their students is really, really impactful. So a lot of times there's just that little barrier, that little hump that we get over and show them that it's not that scary to be out in nature. We can walk through the grass and we're gonna be okay. But those that want to take it even further, we do have opportunities for them to take it further as well. So one of the most exciting projects I've been a part of in Project Prairie so far was this past summer. We actually were awarded a grant through the AZA Conservation Grants Fund, which is a pretty competitive grant to put on a summer institute for teachers right here at the Toledo Zoo. So 24 teachers were selected via an application process to take part in this institute at the zoo. We actually received, I think, like 40 or 50 applications, so it was more competitive than I thought for them to want to come here at the zoo and learn from us. The teachers spent 4 days with myself and my amazing team of Project Prairie specialists and really got them in the field. We went out to our prairies here at the Toledo Zoo, learned about data collection techniques, and since this was funded through AZA, it really gave us the ownership to focus a lot on conservation. Not that Project Prairie isn't conservation focused, but a lot of our efforts in the classroom are really hitting on their standards and inquiry. But this grant allowed us to really create some new conservation leaders in the greater Toledo area. We gained connections with these teachers, and they're gonna be our eyes and ears at these schools advancing these conservation ideas. I want to thank all the people at the zoo that helped us out that week too. We had some amazing experiences up close with the polar bears and feeding our turtles to get them initiated to our local turtle program. So they got amazing once-in-a-lifetime hands-on experiences that they couldn't get at their school by coming to the zoo for that week. Kind of shifting gears here and talking a little more in detail about some of the types of projects that we do with our students and teachers. A big part of Project Prairie is having teachers and students engage with us as citizen scientists. What we mean by citizen science is that anyone can be a real legitimate scientist. I hope we've kind of come to that conclusion today through our presentations as well. These are just a couple of the platforms that we use to engage students in citizen science. So we work with Monarch Joint Venture, Monarch Watch, to tag and release monarch butterflies to learn more about them. We work with iNaturalist, which is a citizen science platform that utilizes photographs of animals to learn more about their distribution. And we work really closely with the GLOBE program. We have some partners at the University of Toledo that work with training our teachers on how to use GLOBE protocols in their prairie. So we'll go through a couple of these more specifically. One of our favorite programs is Monarch Watch. You may have seen this on our website as well. So we work with teachers and students to get them hands-on with monarch butterflies. You actually just hold them in your hand and you press this little sticker onto their cell on their wing. And then scientists in Texas or Mexico or wherever they end up, if they find those tags, they're going to report back to you, hey, we found this butterfly that you tagged on October 1st, 2025 in Toledo, and that's amazing to hear back. We always share that with any teachers or students that tag the butterflies so they can have amazing opportunities like this. It's hard to see up here, but there's a map of a butterfly that was tagged in our region of Ohio and then was recovered in Texas. So all the interdisciplinary learning that students can do, how far did it travel, they can do that math, they can do the geography of how many states the butterfly flew over, so all of these educational connections. With our citizen science emphasis, we run a 3-week period every fall called BioBlitz. This is a huge way that we help students to get engaged in observing their prairie at the beginning of the school year when the prairie is in full bloom. So this is a platform, like I said, called iNaturalist. It's a citizen science website where all you have to do is download the application, snap a photo of a living thing on your phone, and submit it, and then scientists will look at it and determine if they agree with what you said it was. So if you said it was a monarch butterfly, scientists are going to come in and say, yep, that's a monarch butterfly. If 2 scientists do that, the picture becomes what we call research grade. So then scientists can use your picture in their scientific studies. So that's a really powerful way for students to feel like what they did actually impacts real scientific studies. We do make it into kind of a friendly competition each year to see which school can take the most photographs or document the most species that are in their prairie. So this is our leaderboard, I believe, from last year of the prairies that we're taking photographs. So teachers and students are out taking photographs, how many photographs they take. We just finished BioBlitz for this year a couple weeks ago, and we had over 14,000 observations submitted by students, which broke our record by about 10,000. So this year we had super high engagement. We got into the schools, we pumped them up, rallied them, and it was neck and neck race between a couple of schools to see who could get the most observations until the very end. This BioBlitz program has also been featured in the news and was making waves this year. So this is just to show you a little bit about how scientists might use these pictures. So you might be wondering, okay, why would a scientist care about my picture that I took of a butterfly or a plant? They're going to use this to look at distribution. There's so many people that are using this platform that they can see. Maybe you're all familiar with this insect, the spotted lanternfly. You can actually see on iNaturalist the spread of the lanternfly through the United States. As people are taking more and more photos of it, it's starting to move further and further west. So things like this are really valuable for scientists because scientists can't go out and look at every little animal themselves, right? They're kind of crowdsourcing. They're saying, okay, millions of people have their cell phones. They can easily snap a photo for me. This is going to jumpstart the amount of data that I can collect. In the spring, we take this to a whole nother level. We offer a student research symposium here, right in this room, at the Toledo Zoo in Malawi. The last 2 years, we've had around 400 students come to our Student Research Symposium. The Student Research Symposium is meant to celebrate original, authentic inquiry science projects that students do. We've actually had students in kindergarten come to this, all the way up to high school. So it's really incredible to see their projects. There's a couple of pictures up here. So they bring these poster boards. They're actually presenting their data. One of my fondest memories of Project Prairie is working with a 4th grade classroom to get them ready to come to this symposium. The whole semester, they're like, I don't think we can do it. This is hard. We haven't made graphs before. Their teacher hadn't even taught them how to graph yet. And I was like, we can do this together. And we got them to come with a bar graph. That's all that it was. Putting their data that they collected in their prairie. They were counting how many grasshoppers there were, and we were able to put that into a graph. So that's really important to empower students that they can do science, right? We want to create a citizenship that is scientifically literate. That's one of the main things that drives me in this program, that they know what science is, they know how to analyze data, they can make decisions based on actual scientific reasoning and not just their opinions, right? So if they can formulate something from question to hypothesis to data to analyzing that data, at least getting them partway along that process, they're just going to keep improving every year that they come back to this symposium. So I love coming to the symposium, and it's really, really gratifying to see all their projects. All right, so just to recap, Project Prairie connects students to nature by bringing native plantings to their school, where we talked about all of the ecological benefits that a prairie has. So even if it wasn't used for education, we're improving the conservation of our native habitats just by having these prairies. But we're able to make those connections. We're able to have students view themselves as scientists, do original research, and get out there and just explore nature in their backyard. So just putting up here a thank you. This is a huge project, as we've mentioned, 60 schools. We wouldn't be able to do this without our funding from Owens Corning and all of these other organizations that have provided grant funding throughout the whole process, as well as my amazing team in the education department. They're the ones that are out in the field teaching the students, so I wouldn't be able to do it without them. Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, and now from Ohio Prairies, we'll go back to the Solomon Islands and hear from Narelle Wilson, who is doing some incredible work capacity building there. So we'll be developing conservation capacity in the Solomon Islands.
Good morning, everybody. I'd first like to say that I'm really honoured to be asked to speak here today on the occasion of Toledo Zoo's 125th anniversary. The work that is being done here has been truly inspiring to hear other presenters. And I'll also like to just reach out and thank the Aviary team at the Toledo Zoo. I actually arrived last week and have shadowed the veterinary team and the aviary team at the zoo. And I too have been learning. So it's a great example of knowledge sharing that comes from Toledo Zoo. So today I've been asked to present on developing conservation capacity in the Solomon Islands, and I'm drawing from my own experience working on the Santa Cruz ground dove captive breeding program. Some of you may have heard my manager Joe Wood speak about the program yesterday. If you didn't have that opportunity, it is online and it's a very interesting presentation, so you might like to take some time to listen to that too. So a little bit about myself to start is how did I end up in the Solomon Islands? So I'm Australian, and I'm working for an American organisation, Toledo Zoo, and I'm in country in the Solomon Islands as a conservation advisor for Toledo Zoo. Well, I guess it's a bit of a coalescing of my background in veterinary industry, working for biosecurity for federal and state government in Australia, having worked in other countries around the world, including a great opportunity to work with Woodity Aboriginal Corporation, which was our First Nations people's first ranger and conservation team in far north Queensland, in Cape York. So after going back as a mature age student and being a student with my own sons was quite fun, I decided I'd like to go back overseas and do some meaningful work. And I was happy to find a position with the Australian government for developing biosecurity in the Solomon Islands. So off I went in 2018 and 19 And I went to the Solomon Islands to work for their government, working on policy implementation and to work on a coconut rhinoceros beetle incursion that was a serious problem for the Solomon Islands. While I was there during that time, I actually met Joe Wood and the Santa Cruz ground dove because they were at the post-quarantine facility that was owned by the biosecurity. And I guess, Joe, it's probably a stretch to call it a facility because it was little more than a chicken pen at the time. But I was curious about that. And I guess during a big circle, COVID grounded everybody. I went back to working for government in biosecurity, working in the Consultative Committee for Disease Outbreaks. And at the end of that contract, I still had a desire to go back to the Solomon Islands. So I can't tell you how excited I was to see that Toledo Zoo was advertising for a conservation advisor in country in the Solomon Islands, predominantly working on Santa Cruz ground dove. And I'm still excited that I have been able to take that role on and return to the Solomon Islands. So, I mean, I couldn't be more proud to work for an organisation like the Toledo Zoo who have such a commitment to global conservation. So that's a real thrill for me. Some of you may be asking the same thing I did when I first looked at that very first job in the Solomon Islands. Well, where is the Solomon Islands? Well, you can see from the map that it's a western location in the Pacific Ocean. It's probably closest to PNG, is a good landmark. And if you look at that location, you can see that I'm a little cold this week. It's a very hot and humid climate with an abundant rainfall. We only have a wet and a dry season, but there's really little variation in the temperature. Unfortunately, it's one of the poorest nations in the world, and it is still a developing country. Unfortunately, this country also relies heavily on the extraction industry, so logging and mining from Southeastern Asian organisations. So you may ask, well, why does the Solomon Islands matter in conservation, and why are Toledo Zoo involved? Well, actually, the Solomon Islands is one of the world's most ecologically significant regions. This fact is often overlooked. It does actually have a higher rate of endemic species than the Galapagos Islands. And that comes about by its dense primary forests and that it is a unique chain of volcanic islands which has had an interesting evolutionary path. It is actually an ecological treasure, and we do need to protect some of these primary forests, which is vital for global biodiversity. And we really do need to protect these forests because they're the habitats of many of our endangered species, particularly in the Solomon Islands. I have included a table there which highlights that over the 12-year period there's been an astounding loss of primary forest, and that's the habitat of so many of the species that are endangered in the Solomon Islands. And I think that just puts a spotlight on the fact that there are many gravely threatened habitats, which translates to many threatened species. And unfortunately, the wildlife trade, the illegal wildlife trade, is also a big problem in the Solomon Islands. I know it's a global problem, but it is a very big problem in the Solomon Islands, as is climate change. They're very much the chain of islands. 992 islands are subject to climate change. Yeah, so I think you could all agree that the Solomon Islands is definitely a biodiversity hotspot. And with that 992 islands, you will find really remarkable species that can't be found anywhere else. It boasts that it's the home of the world's largest skink, which can measure up to 80 centimetres and has a prehensile tail. In fact, it was on exhibit here at the Toledo Zoo until more recently. It's also home to a giant Guadalcanal monkey-faced bat, which is now adapted to being a nut-eating bat and lives in the tree canopies. It's only found in central Guadalcanal and a very small population in Fiji. And it also boasts that it has one of the world's largest native rats, and it's a giant rat. It's the size of a well-fed house cat, and it has very powerful teeth that crack open their coconuts. So local people are not really a fan of the giant rat, native rat, but it is a beautiful creature, and with that habitat loss and the illegal wildlife trade, it is again very threatened. So I think, just looking at this truly extraordinary biodiversity that exists in the Solomon Islands, it's really worth the investment in looking at how we can provide conservation capacity. So talking about species that are endemic to Solomon Islands, now it's time for me to introduce my favourite topic, which is the Santa Cruz ground dove. They are endemic to the Pacific region. They only exist in the Solomon Islands on a very small volcanic island called Tinakula. And there is a small colony in Vanuatu. So for those who missed Joe's talk yesterday, I will just touch on a few of his major points, key points there, because it leads into why we're doing our capacity conservation program in the Solomon Islands. So the Santa Cruz ground dove was feared extinct in 2015, and that's where Toledo Zoo came in when, in 2017, the Santa Cruz ground doves were part of the illegal wild trade being smuggled out of the country. So Joe was called in to care for the 110 that were seized by the Solomon Island government, and 60 of those ended up going to the Singapore bird park as a insurance population. And the other significant thing that happened is Tinakula, being a volcanic island, had an eruption. So between the eruption and the illegal wildlife trade, this actually puts a real threat to the significant global population of the Santa Cruz ground dove. Now, 60 of those went to Singapore, the others remained in Solomon Islands. And Joe started to establish a captive breeding program. But there are a lot of challenges in the Solomon Islands, being a developing country, and we really lacked a lot of resources. We were fortunate that Toledo Zoo were able to support all the efforts that Joe put in. There was other things that happened that were out of everyone's control, like COVID-19 restrictions, and those closing of the borders forced Joe to leave Solomon Islands in 2020. So during his absence, the Solomon Island team that had worked with Joe managed to keep the birds alive during COVID. But the other thing that happened was then in 2021 there was civil unrest, which is quite often the case in a developing country. So it really focused the spotlight on the team that were left in country without the support of an in-country mentor. And they really came to the rise, and it is due to their fortitude that the birds survived both COVID and the civil unrest in the Solomon Islands. And it wasn't until the borders opened in 2022 when Joe was able to start to make periodic visits back to the Solomon Islands. But what became apparent was that this program really needed someone in country to build the capacity in the team. They had done a tremendous job, and we still have some of those members there today. So Martin Prescott has been in the program since the inception, and he really leads that team and does a tremendous job. But everybody needed to have someone in country. So it's the support of Toledo Zoo that supported a in-country conservation advisor role, which is me, and I arrived back in country in January this year, 2025. So I'll just introduce my team there. So we have Bettina there doing her food preparation, and I really enjoyed working with the Aviary team, as I mentioned last week. You can see Bettina sitting out in an uncovered area. There is no enclosed area to do this. I was admiring the stainless steel sinks that the Toledo Zoo have because we only have a tap, and I'm looking for donors already back in country to provide us with a fridge because we have nothing to keep our food cool. This requires the team in Solomon Islands to go to market every day they need to get fresh produce. We can't keep a large stock of eggs because it's too hot. And we can't do any preparation the day before. So it requires our team to start working very early in the morning. And, you know, we mostly ask them to work at 6:30 on the food preparation. And we have to adjust how we feed them. So we will put chick starter crumb out early in the morning if they are breeding and if they have chicks until we get the preparation. So Martin is in the back row with me there, and we have Petsika and Rosie and Bettina. And Martin is holding a sub-adult there. So they do a tremendous job, and I'm so proud of them. So how do we build our conservation capacity in the Solomon Islands? And I think there's been a really strong theme across some of the talks yesterday and again today, and even this morning's presentations, that whatever we do, the program needs to be bigger than us. It can't be about the individual, what we do. We are there as a leader and the support of Toledo Zoo and any other external funders, but we need to ensure that we build capacity in the programs that we deliver overseas for the conservation, the long-term sustainable conservation of our endangered species. So one of the first things that I realised working in the Solomon Islands is that everything happens in island time. So that means that it's slow, but it happens surely. Slowly and surely, that's what we have to learn. But I have to say that with the dedication from the team, what we lack in resources, they make up in willingness and their fortitude to learn and to turn up, and for that I'm grateful. So we've been able to have success this year, getting the team skilled up in nutrition. That was one of the first things that we addressed. And the other thing that we've heard a little bit about, and that's the environmental enrichment. So we looked at how we could mimic the environment for the Santa Cruz ground dove, which lives on this volcanic island. So this team have been really good with that and have assisted us in going out to source what we need from the local landowners. So the Solomon Islands, you can't just go into the wild and take what you want. You do need to go through village chiefs, you need to follow custom and tradition, and you need to ask permission to take coral sand from the beach or perches from the trees that the Santa Cruz ground dove like to perch on, or the seagrass, the coastal seagrasses that they like to nest in. So it is a knowledge exchange. We are using some of the Indigenous knowledge as well as us imparting knowledge all the time. One of the important areas to skill them with was the safe handling and the record keeping for the Santa Cruz ground dove, which just through events had been very difficult to have a continuous record data system. And we've been working with Monica here at Toledo Zoo, and we now have the Santa Cruz ground doves on the Zoological Information System, which is a global reporting system. And that's something that we will involve our team with. They're very excited to see that what they're doing in their small Solomon Islands is actually going global. So it's really, really thrilling to see that they enjoy that. The other thing that's been good for the Santa Cruz ground dove, good for Toledo Zoo, but also good for our team, is to see the success rate we've had this year in changing our nutrition, changing our environmental enhancement, and the way we do our captive breeding and breeding selection is that we've had a 90% chick rate survival rate. So that's really notable for an endangered species in a captive breeding program. This is one of the pairs, two in a clutch, that has successfully made it to adulthood and survived today, which is not overly common in Santa Cruz ground doves. They generally lay one or two eggs and you get one chick. So we're really, really thrilled. The overall increase in the population just from January till the end of September this year alone has been close to 66% increase in the population. So we went from 41 to 68. And that really is just the support of having an in-country advisor there to work with the team. So really it emphasises that our goal, Toledo Zoo, our goal working in the Solomon Islands is to empower the local people to lead these programs into the future. And we do want to expand on our other endangered species in the Solomon Islands. So in order to do that, we have to have sustainability in our conservation capacity. One of the other things that's worth mentioning is that we have started to expand our source of sponsorship, so not to rely entirely on Toledo Zoo and their donors and funding, but to also go out and source funding from other corporate sponsors. And to do that, we had to open a charitable trust. But we've also reached out to the Solomon Islands National University. And part of the theme this morning has been about bringing students and people into internships and scholarships. And I think that is really important because in Solomon Islands, there is no public education, and a lot of people don't have the opportunity to have education. So what we've been doing is connecting with Solomon Islands National University and asking them to include some of the importance of conservation of endangered species and captive breeding into their environmental program. And they've been very willing, and we also have invited the head of the Faculty of the Environment Division onto our board. So all of this is about concentrating on long-term sustainability of conservation programs. So as I touched on there, we have established a charitable trust. Now that sounds easy, but in the Solomon Islands, there's a lot of inefficiency in the government processes, and it was a strong. It required a lot of strength and resilience to get through the 6 months to open this charitable trust. And again, thanks to the support from Toledo Zoo, because their administration department were also very supportive for us to get this up and running. But this enables us to go to external funders, receive that funding. We do need to have transparency in how money is spent in the Solomon Islands, particularly if it comes from the Solomon Islands government. So this was an avenue for us to receive that funding, and it makes it a legal process. So this is also a way for Toledo Zoo to demonstrate that we are also looking externally at getting funding, but it does align with the global funding standards. And we have been successful in our first grant application. So what we hope to do with that is to have a visitors information centre, which we can create a storyboard on the Santa Cruz ground dove, and we can start to have some awareness programs, just like you are here in Ohio, where we can start to teach schooling groups and public the importance of conservation. Yeah, so our corporate sponsors are incredibly important. They're a big part of our success. Without our donors and our supporters, we wouldn't be successful at all. And we are incredibly grateful that SD Guthrie, which is one of the world's largest certified palm oil producers, came on board when the Santa Cruz ground dove needed a home. The post-quarantine centre in the Solomon Islands at the biosecurity complex was having a rebuild, and they asked Joe to move the Santa Cruz ground doves out of post-quarantine. So they needed a home, and there wasn't a lot available. And Solomon Islands has a lot of traditional custom land ownership, so there was not a lot of land available. And that's where SD Guthrie came in, and their local subsidiary company is what we call GPOL. It's Guadalcanal Plains Palm Oil Limited. They allowed us to use some leased land that they leased from the landowners. And they funded the building of aviaries to keep the Santa Cruz ground dove. And in fact, as we speak, unfortunately while I'm out of country, but as we speak, they are rebuilding a facility for our repatriation of the birds, 15 of the females that were sent to Singapore that will come back. So the partnerships are really important in the building conservation capacity and our programs overseas in captive breeding programs. And I think that this is a real demonstration of how we can do this internationally with the knowledge exchange and working with corporate partners. And it does exemplify how you can do corporate stewardship. I think it's a very good example of what we've done. So if you want sustainability and you want to build the capacity in conservation overseas, and particularly in developing country where there's a lot of challenges and not many resources, you really do need to have a good model to be working off. And we see that this model is something that can be replicated, and that makes it really valuable. You want to be able to do something that you can expand and that can be copied to benefit. And it shows that collaborations can be between government and between zoos, and this enables us to protect both the vulnerable habitats and the endangered species that live in it. So this is really a blueprint that's been grounded in the science, but also in the local leadership, and it's a real demonstration of shared responsibility. And that's really what conservation is all about. So I mentioned the repatriation. So we have a repatriation program that is in the early stages. We're working with Mandai on this. We have 15 Santa Cruz ground doves that will be returned to the Solomon Islands. The reason we need to do that is for the genetic diversity that's required, and that captive species in Singapore will enable us to expand our breeding program. The other important area of that is it honours Toledo Zoo's agreement between the Solomon Island government and Toledo Zoo when the birds were first sent out in 2017. And it's a really good news story, and it's a real milestone that we've got to a point where we have facilities where we can actually return some of these Santa Cruz ground doves and that we can expand the breeding program. So talking about milestones, I think it's time that we look at just what we achieved. And I know Matt touched on this, saying sometimes we forget the achievements that we make, and I think that that's true. So for the Solomon Islands and Toledo Zoo's breeding program, we have had a whole lot of firsts, and I've listed them here so that we can all celebrate these collectively. So it's a first time that there's been an undertaking of a repatriation of endangered species returning back to the Solomon Islands. It's a first captive breeding program for an endangered species in the Solomon Islands. It's a first dedicated, purpose-built conservation breeding centre for the Solomon Islands. And it's certainly the first time and the only biosecurity quarantine accredited purpose-built aviary for the Solomon Islands. And of course there's the insurance population. It's the first time an insurance population has been provided for an endangered species for the Solomon Islands, and there are many of them, many at high risk. And it's the first time that a charitable trust has been established for an IUCN endangered species. So all of this, is a great achievement for Toledo Zoo. I mean, yes, locally, the efforts that we've put in, but for Toledo Zoo, this is also a huge achievement, something they can be very proud of. And, it's in a very challenging environment working in the Solomon Islands with very little resources. So we are terribly grateful to our donors and our corporate sponsors. So hopefully I'm catching up on some of the time that's been lost here this morning. So just in closing, I think it's important to make these points that the Solomon Islands is a biodiversity hotspot, and it is globally significant. It has levels of endemic species that face severe threats from logging and mining, climate change, the illegal wildlife trade, and invasive species. The Santa Cruz ground dove breeding program in the Solomon Islands demonstrates that successful capacity building and empowerment of local leadership can lead to successful programs. Thirdly, the Toledo Zoo's collaborative conservation model really shows that it's possible to work in a culturally complex and a challenging environment, and that we can have successful programs for conservation. And lastly, and importantly, this conservation program serves as a template that we can replicate for other species. And that recovery can only happen through cross-sector partnerships that are really valuable to conservation. So I'm going to close with a little reflection here. I've been incredibly moved and inspired, and we saw Kari's also emotional and passionate about her elephant programs, and I feel the same about the Santa Cruz ground dove. But I also feel very passionate about conservation globally as well. So I would just like to say, as I mentioned, the Solomon Islands, like everything, conservation moves in island time. So slowly but steady. But we have seen that through patience and through partnership and purpose, that the Santa Cruz ground dove reminds us that even the rarest and the smallest of voices in nature really matter. So I'd like us not to just imagine what is possible, but if we commit to developing conservation capacity in the Solomon Islands, because if it's not us, then who? And if it's not now, then when? So thank you for listening to our work in the Solomon Islands. That's all for today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I love that. All right. So we're moving along here. Part of what we do here is we're always looking for new talent and new people that are passionate about conservation and how we can get them involved in some of the work that we're interested in here at the zoo, or helping to actually magnify their own impact with some of our support. And so recently, Oliver Crowther, who's here from the UK, came to our attention, and he is going to be helping us with some projects at the Toledo Zoo, and he's going to talk today about the project that kind of brought him to our awareness. So his talk is entitled "Supporting Conservation Innovation: The Twite Project," and I'll just tell you right now, a twite is a small bird from England.
Are we good? Yep, perfect. Right, hi everybody. Welcome to my talk. This is on how the Toledo Zoo is supporting conservation innovation, just like Jeff said as well, which is with my Twite conservation project. I'd just like to start by thanking Jeff, Joe, and everyone at Toledo Zoo for having me. I've had a fantastic week so far, and I hope you've all enjoyed sort of the symposium. I really have, and it's been awfully educational. So, I want to start by justifying why is a 23-year-old stood up here in front of you all today talking about my project. I know there's going to be a lot of people in the room with far more knowledge and experience than me, but maybe what I lack in that experience, I'll absolutely make up for in passion. So, like I say, my name is Oliver Crowther. I graduated from the University of Nottingham with a master's degree in bioveterinary science this summer. This gave me a really detailed insight into animal behaviour, nutrition, and their biology. And actually, I did my master's research project on the behaviour of twite and how it changes as there's a difference in the sex ratios of these birds. I'm also an aviculturalist, so as a kid, I really had a passion for birds and continue to for this day, so they've sort of been the major part of my life since I was very, very young, and I've been keeping and breeding birds over the past 13 years. In that time, I've bred over 40 different bird species, ranging from small exotic birds, of course, your farmyard birds, your chickens and your ducks, smaller other like galliform species, so things like pheasants, partridge, quail, doves and pigeons. And then something I'm particularly well known for is breeding European native species, particularly Fringillidae family finches and European softbills. As I mentioned, I'm quite well known for something in particular, and that is content creation. So I've built a brand called OC Aviary, which is my logo down in the left corner. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, over where I've built over 120,000 followers, and I get approximately 4 million monthly views, looking at all things to do with aviculture, which is sharing my knowledge of these species, and sort of the experiences and going behind the scenes at some of the UK's top zoos. So these are just a couple of examples of the birds I keep and breed and I have experience with that I've been sort of building up over the past couple of years. So on the top right-hand corner, we have a baby hawfinch. So this is actually one you can see in the bottom corner of the previous slide. They're quite a difficult species to keep and breed in captivity, and had quite a bit of success with them this year. We produced this one chick with these little fluffy earmuffs, as you can see. Fantastic little bird. Yeah, once again, very, very difficult, very, very specialist. So really quite a proud breeding. In the top left-hand corner, we have bearded reedlings, also known as bearded tits. They're a very small soft-bill species. They feed on insects, fruits, occasionally little bits of seed. So they kind of eat a little bit of everything, to be honest, a bit like myself. We've got in the bottom left corner, canaries. They're something I use more as a model species. They're quite adaptable, they're domesticated, and they're just useful to have on the side when I have these really quite sensitive European bird species. Having them as a backup for parents does work quite nicely. And then in the bottom right, we have a lesser red-polled chick, and they're a species that I know you get here as a bit of a rare migrant in North America as well. So, how did the Twite project form? Well, first off, you've got myself. So I have been working with the bird called the Twite, which I'm going to introduce to you in a second, for the past 5 or 6 years. I got my first pair just after lockdown, and that's as an addition to my private collection. And then there's this man here called Derek Gow. So Derek Gow is a UK conservation and rewilding expert, and he'd been monitoring the situation of this bird over the past couple of years and over the many decades, and have seen quite a steep decline, as we're going to go on to talk about. So we decided that between myself and Derek, we would save this little bird, because it was a bit of a now or never situation. And it was with his charity, the Keep It Wild Trust, that we formed the Twite project in 2023, and as of 2025, we've also now got the support of the Toledo Zoo as well. So, this is the Twite. This doesn't look the most exciting bird, I completely get that, but they're actually extremely quite rare. So they're a small granivorous bird belonging to the Fringillidae family, so they're tiny little bird, something that best describing them, you might have seen the sparrows that are about the zoo. They're quite commonly confused with them. They're not the most exciting looking bird, but they have some really quite unique behavioural traits. Now, they only weigh approximately 15 grams, so really quite small. I think probably the smallest animal that you'll have seen anyone working with today, or maybe the butterflies were a little bit smaller, but still very, very small. Now, they're found right across Northern Europe and Asia, so there's a lot of them in sort of continental Western Europe. There's then a giant gap of several thousand kilometres, and then you will find them in a part of Central Asia as well. They inhabit grassland and moorland, so they're really quite a highland species. They like those higher altitudes. They're not something like, for example, here in North America, you have American goldfinches and pine siskins. They're more of a lowland species. These are very much adapted for the highlands. And there's 9 different subspecies of twite. The one that I'm particularly interested in, which is the focus of the project, is the pipilans. So, they have quite unique nesting behaviour for a finch. As I mentioned about the American goldfinches and pine siskins you have here, alongside many other Fringillidae family finches, they nest in trees or in hedgerows. They nest quite high off the ground. Whereas twites are quite unique. They nest completely on the floor. Now, is this due to the habitat they occupy in these moorlands being completely treeless? Well, maybe, but also is it's just their natural behaviours. They want to nest in the undergrowth. So they build a little nest on the ground out of roots and small grasses. They build it sort of underneath bracken and heather, and they lay 5 little blue and brown eggs. So what's the behaviour of these birds then? What's something that makes them quite unique for a finch? Well, first off, they're highly sociable. So in all finch species, you will generally find they congregate in large flocks throughout the winter. They form their pairs, and then they go off in their individual pairs to breed. Well, twites are quite different. They're always found in flocks at all times of year, so they're a highly sociable species. They're also found in these small flocks when mating. So you might find flocks of 10 to 15 pairs of birds actually occupying a small area of moorland to breed. And this is called an aggregation. The thing about this, though, is that when you have a really sociable species, you would usually expect them to have cross-pair matings. You'll have one male mating with multiple females. But actually, twites are highly monogamous, so they really are very well bonded to their partners and will not entertain the sort of approach from any other birds in their species. And then in the winter months, these small flocks of maybe 30, 40 birds will congregate on the coasts across Europe and Asia. And in flocks of absolute thousands, if not tens of thousands of birds, they will go to coastal salt marshes in search of food in less harsh weather. So this is a figure from a study of twite migrations in Western Europe. So I'm just going to describe this to you. First off, down the centre you can notice as there's an arrow pointing out a dotted line. This is the separation between the pipilans, which is the British endemic subspecies on the left-hand side, and the Flavirostris on the right-hand side, which is the European continental species. Then you have these areas highlighted in green, which are in the north. This is their breeding sites. And then if you follow the lines down to these purple areas, that is where the birds overwinter. So this figure was looking at about 22,000 individual records for twite across the Western Europe and looking at the ring records and basically the distribution of them. Now, one of the things you might notice is that you do occasionally have birds from Britain overshooting the channel and ending up in continental Europe. However, there's actually no records of birds from continental Europe ending up in Britain, and this is as a breeding bird, so you have to treat them as two completely distinct subspecies. So what is it that make twite the focus of this conservation project then? Well, to begin with, I want to take you back about 100 years ago. If you'd gone on the moorlands in the UK about 100 years ago or so, you would have found hundreds of thousands of these birds in giant flocks. They was actually so common, they gained the nickname the Pennine Finch. You would always go out to these moorland areas and you'd be almost guaranteed to see them. Yet, they have had a massive decline. So there's been a 72% decline in the species, the subspecies even between 1999 to 2013. It was at a similar trajectory prior to 1999 and continues at that trajectory since 2013. So they've had a really quite steep decline over the past 100 years or so. Now, they're also a red-listed species by the IUCN, so this is making the subspecies, the pipilans twite, particularly rare and obviously of conservation concern. 98% of this remaining population is found in Scotland, so this is believed to be approximately 2,000 birds. So a massive decline in the British Isles compared to many decades ago. And actually, so much so, the population has now become fragmented in England, and there's actually only known to be 12 birds remaining in the whole of England. So that's a massive area, and that's a huge decrease in this population. So why do we think the birds have declined? Well, there's a lot of research ongoing with this to fully determine the effects of... Well, why do we think they're going extinct, and what's making them so rare? Well, the first is changes in agriculture. So what you're seeing over the past 100 years or so is an area where you'd have maybe, let's say, a kilometre square of farmland, and in there you'd have 10 or 15 different species of crop being farmed. You'd have some areas that aren't being farmed and are left to seed, and this would provide plenty of food throughout all the months of the year for the birds to feed on. But now it's monocultures, so you're ending up with situations of giant fields of single species of crops, and therefore the birds just don't have anything to feed on. Additionally, the use of chemicals is one of the issues. So particularly imagine you're only 15 grams and you take a mouthful of pesticide. It can take quite a toll on you. So they're massively affected by the changes in agriculture. Overgrazing is another giant issue for them. So you're having lots of sheep and cattle in the areas where these birds would nest in the moorland, and also in the feeding grounds where these grasslands. The seeds of these plants that are growing are no longer coming into fruition. They're not maturing, and therefore the birds don't have anything to feed on. So once again, you're cutting down that food supply for the birds. Climate change is another. So we're seeing a massive restriction in and sort of retraction of the volume of peatland in the UK. So that is generally where you're getting moorlands forming and growing, and that's where these birds are nesting. So their breeding habitat is reducing. And finally, the more recent problem is genetic diversity. As we mentioned, there's 12 birds remaining in England. All of them are found at a tiny little site in the middle of nowhere. So there's absolutely no recruitment from these birds. There's no new birds coming in. So much so that of the 12 that are remaining, 9 are males, 3 are females, and only 1 female is actually known to be fertile. So it's a pretty dire situation for them. So what is our plan? How are we going to save this little bird? Well, the intention is to captive breed from at least 30 pairs. The idea of this is to meet the 5,500 minimum viable population rule. So 50 birds to prevent inbreeding depression and 500 to prevent genetic drift. So you've got a really good, healthy stock to go at initially. We also need to be encouraging these birds to perform natural behaviour. Of course, we've got these birds that are from aviculture. They're from private collections. There's not, to my knowledge, any zoos anywhere in the world that have these birds. So there's not really a giant source of stock that is particularly kept in the way you'd want them to be, as close to nature as possible. So we're going to have to make sure that these birds are performing natural behaviour. And finally, we're going to promote random mate choice. So one of the big practices in aviculture is you select for certain traits. We want the birds to be bigger. We want them to be more stripy. We want them to be darker in colour. Well, obviously, we don't want that in the wild birds. We want them all to be uniform and all look the same, because if we're selectively breeding, these birds are going to have traits that are just not desirable as to what they want to be in the wild. So promoting random mate choice is going to undo that and get the birds into a natural sort of state. So, year 1 of the project. We sourced our first birds from private aviculture in 2023, and in 2024, we got the first 5 pairs of birds set up to breed. Now, this began, from quite humble beginnings. This is the aviary in my garden that we house them in, so only a very small aviary block. We have 5 aviaries in here. They are 2 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and 6 feet tall, so particularly small comparative to how a lot of birds are housed. But the idea of this was to keep it as familiar as possible. Remember, we're working with a small bird species here that are particularly rare, so if we can keep it ideally as familiar as possible to how they've been kept for many decades, then it's going to give us the best chance of success of breeding them whilst we're trying to get our population numbers up in captivity. So it was quite successful. We had an excellent start to the project in the first year. From those 5 pairs, all sourced from different breeders, therefore different bloodlines, we produced 20 chicks. So that was a fantastic start, very, very pleasing. So on the left-hand side, you can see the chicks, I think a nest of 5 at 12 days old there. And then on the right-hand side, we have a nest of chicks that had just been closed rung, with the largest actually being about 5 days old and the smallest in that bottom right-hand corner only being about 2 days old. And then in this video here, you can just see how we're breeding the birds. So you've got mum on the left, dad on the right, and their 5 chicks in that nest site at the back. And the idea of having them nesting like this was, like we say, keep it as familiar as possible, giving the birds what they're used to for many, many decades so we can have the best chances of successfully breeding them. So we achieved a number of milestones in the first year with them, which was really, really pleasing. The first of those milestones was having birds breeding naturally. They're building their own nests. Now, this is quite a uncommon thing when it comes to finches in private aviculture. You often give the birds a preformed nest bowl and they will lay their eggs in that, or probably won't even build their own nest. They usually can't be bothered and they're too lazy. So you make them build their own nests, and that's how we want them. That's how the birds need to be if we're going to put them into the wild. And they did that. So we have a hen in the middle. You can see she built her own freestanding nest in a small shrub. And then on the right-hand side, you have the mother on 6 eggs. And on the left, 2 weeks later, is her 6 chicks. And the reason that that is so significant is that these birds nested on the floor in the first year. So that's quite uncommon for finches in captivity. Usually how you're going to breed them is you put a nest site 6 feet off the floor for the owner's convenience. So you can walk up to it, take a look in, see what the chicks and the eggs are doing. Well, putting it on the floor and actually having them do that natural instinct, that natural behavior of breeding and nesting on the floor was absolutely fantastic. So that's a major milestone. And then year 2 of the project. So we've already managed to build our population up so far. We've doubled our numbers, which is fantastic. So what we decided to do this time round was set up 12 pairs of birds. So this would give us 12 pairs for the spring. So this is spring 2025. This is a few months ago. Now, of course, we quickly outgrew the aviary block in my garden, so we had to build something new, and I was quite pleased with that as well. It gave me a lot of room to have a lot of nice birds. So we have, along that back wall, we have 10 aviaries, and at the very end, we have a very large aviary in there as well. These were increased in size because we think that this should give the birds a more higher chance of breeding success. So these aviaries are 3 feet wide, 8 feet long and 6 feet tall, so over double the size that we were previously breeding them in. This really helped lower aggression that we were seeing in the birds in the first year. You do often get the male birds can be quite boisterous with the females, often chasing them, trying to encourage them to go back to nest and breed. So having them in slightly larger aviaries really worked well for that. It also helped keep them fit. So one of the other issues is they do like to be quite selective in what you feed them. So if you give them a seed mix, they will absolutely pick out the equivalent of the cake. It's like if you go to a buffet with children, they're not going to pick the salad, they'll pick the cake every time. So it's the exact same with the birds. So it was a very challenging season, in all honesty. Despite the changes we had made, the major issue was we had quite extreme weather in the UK that just basically created really unfavourable conditions to house and breed these birds in. We had really high temperatures, an absolute lack of rain, so the complete opposite of what these birds like. Despite that, it provided a great opportunity to learn, so if this does happen in the future, we know how to amend it and to bring on further success. And because this happened quite early in the breeding season, we managed to have some success still. We made those changes, and we still produced 10 healthy offspring, which was really, really pleasing. So once again, we're increasing our numbers further towards that goal. So what are the future aims of the project? Well, the first is to build our parent stock population up to at least 60 individuals. Once again, this is trying to meet that 5,500 rule for the minimum viable population, because what we're going to be looking to do is put larger numbers out of birds out into the wild in the future. The next is to breed them in wild aviaries. Now, the idea of breeding them in wild aviaries, and what I mean by that is, we've got them in a functional setup at the moment. We've got them in aviaries that work really well for breeding them in that clinical setting. But actually, are the birds going to be able to breed naturally if we release them? Well, that remains to be seen. So the first thing we're going to do is get a number of birds out into these wild landscaped aviaries that will be full of boulders, of heather, of bracken, and have them breeding in there. And we can then compare what are the success rates like. Are we breeding plenty of birds by that method? What's the comparison between the indoor aviaries, as we've seen previously, and these outdoor aviaries? Then we're going to be working on a reintroduction strategy. So we aren't just shooting in the dark with this. We haven't just done this on, we'll get all the birds together and we'll work out where we're putting them later. We do know where we're putting them. We've got a number of sites across the UK that are, on paper, fantastic for twites. The problem is that the wild birds are in such a small population. They barely migrate anymore. They're just never going to recolonize these areas. So if we can put them in areas which on paper are fantastic for them, they've got all of the breeding habitat, all of the feeding habitat, then that is going to be fantastic. And finally, we're going to prepare for those releases in 2027 and 2028. So hopefully, if everything goes well, next year in 2026 and 2027, then we'll have some birds to release, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I'm really hoping that, all going well, we will be able to see this site on moorlands across the UK very, very soon. So thank you very much all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Oliver. That was great. We're going to have one last talk before lunch. That'll be ensuring early access to conservation education, the Toledo Community Preschool. So for those of you that don't know, we operate a free preschool here at the Toledo Zoo that provides classes to any preschool in the area. And our curator of education, Jodi Anderson, will be talking about this great program. Yeah, look, you got a puppet.
What's that?
You got a puppet.
I do. Good afternoon. I had to check. Thank you all again for being here. As Jeff said, it's my privilege to serve the education department here at the Toledo Zoo, and my responsibility today is to share with you the story of our community preschool. It seems fitting to me, after all of the stories in the celebration that you have been a part of this week, including this morning. You've heard about Dr. Cross's turtle program for the older students. Alex talked about our Project Prairie, which serves a wide range of grade levels. And you've heard our global partners talk so much about the importance of education, both in their local communities and the outreach that they do with the schools in their area. So maybe it's fitting, after these 3 days, that we land on this story, which is some of our youngest learners that join us here at the Toledo Zoo, and where the story begins. So what do you remember about preschool? Some of us are dialing back a little farther than others. So let me share with you a quick minute or two version as a reminder. So I'm going to need you to play a little bit of the part of the preschoolers that join us here. So learners, I'm so glad you have joined us here today at the zoo. As you might remember, we've been learning about habitats. Do we remember what habitats are? Just shake your head, yes. So we know that habitats are places where animals get what they need to survive. So their food, their water, their shelter, the spaces that they need. So the first thing we're going to do today is I want to share with you a story about animals in a special habitat called a mountain. Do you know what a mountain is? Have you seen a mountain before? Keep in mind, when our preschoolers come, there's a decent chance that none of the students in front of us have ever seen a real mountain in person. So we might show them a mountain. And I would say, learners, does this remind you of a shape? A square? A circle? What shape does it remind you of? A triangle. What colors do you see in our mountain? You see some gray. You see some white. Does anybody know why the top of the mountain looks white? Okay, some of our students are on top of this, as often happens. That's right, there's snow there. Do we find animals where there's snow? Lots of them. So let me share with you a story about animals from all over the world where we might find on a mountain, some of them where there's snow, and some of them where it's a little warmer. Before some of you are maybe panicking that I'm going to read this whole storybook, know that I'm only going to read just a couple pages. So this is called Over on a Mountain, somewhere in the world. Over on a mountain grazing in the morning sun, lived a woolly mother llama and her little cria, one. Roll, said the mother. I roll, said the one. So they rolled in the dirt, grazing in the morning sun. Over on a mountain where the bamboo grew, lived a giant mother panda and her little cubs, two. Eat, said the mother. We eat, said the two. So they ate and ate and ate where the bamboo grew. I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but as you can tell, we're counting, and it goes up to 10. So you've caught that as part of that preschool experience. Let's put this somewhere where I'm not. It includes some of those basic pieces of learning. And so if you can think of what your preschool was, I can picture a little bit still of what my preschool experience was. But imagine that your preschool is a place that spans over 60 acres. And the teachers include conservation, educators, zookeepers, scientists, naturalists, and where the curriculum is based on the curiosity that we want children to have about the natural world. Because that's where the Toledo Community Preschool comes in. So what I gave you was just a little sample of what we sort of provide for children that come and join us here. So starting with a story is common. Let's remember that with these preschoolers, we're talking age 3 and 4. And I don't know if you've ever unloaded a bus of 15 or so 3 or 4-year-olds. But a story is not only a good place to start the learning, but it's a good way to settle in for the learning. The benefit of our community preschool in part is the unique experiences that we give to students. So we get to share with them things like the opportunity to touch what we call a biofact. So if we went a little farther in our mountain story, we would encounter the snow leopards. And we would share with children that part of their day with us that day is we're going to go and meet a snow leopard on grounds, but we can provide them the opportunity to actually touch the fur of a snow leopard. Now, we might also ask them, just as a connection, of what other animals they know that have fur, or we want them to connect it to animals here in Ohio. And there's a certain art form to our teachers doing that, because if you've ever had a conversation with a 3 or a 4-year-old, if you ask them what animals they know, we want them to identify with the earliest animals they probably knew, which are their pets. But if you ask a 3 or 4-year-old about their dog, what are you going to get? Their dog, everything that's ever befallen that dog, the cat, the neighbor's cat, and probably a story about the neighbor as well. So we want students to be engaged in connecting in those, but we also want them to identify what is important about conservation of the species that we have here at the zoo. So the other exciting thing that happens with our preschoolers is we do go out on grounds. And we actually spend quite a bit of time here at the zoo being able to experience the exhibits and the unique experiences that we provide. Usually, and I shouldn't say usually, every year there's a theme that ties together all of the experiences that our community preschool has. And that allows us to explore different animals and different environments with a connection. So I gave you that little bit of a picture, but let me just share this quick video with you. This is our preschool. Any guesses as to what they're doing? Yes? Who said butterfly? Yeah, that's actually what's in here. That's actually what's in the video here. This is they're exploring the monarch life cycle as this particular activity. So a quick little bit of kind of a geography and a little bit of a history lesson is the community preschool here at the Toledo Zoo has had a variety of locations. So as the zoo has evolved, so has the space for the community preschool. So for our staff that have been here for quite some time, it actually began in a space that was used primarily for birthday parties in Africa, relocated a few years later to the former conference room at the aquarium, relocated again to the basement of what is now the ProMedica Museum of Natural History, And then in 2018, which coincided in part with the renovation of the museum, moved to what has been the home of the education department since then, which is the Carson Family Education Center. So if you're not sure where this building is when you approach the main gate off the Anthony Wayne Trail lot, it is to the right of the main gate. We have a lot of prairie growth right now, so we're kind of tucked back in there to find us. So here's the part of the story that's brings in why this is called about ensuring access to the community preschool and to conservation education. Prior to around that time when the Carson Family Education Center was built, our preschool was actually tuition-based. So we had a focus on kindergarten readiness, and families could register, pay the tuition. We could serve up to 48 children, and the preschool was actually licensed under the state, under Jobs and Family Services. Half days, a few days a week. And every year the enrollment was full and there was a waiting list. So for those 48 families, and many families had multiple children graduate from our community preschool, or I should say our preschool at the time. And part of the experience was actually in the state of Ohio, and we also work with now with preschools that are from Michigan, and it's very similar. There's what's called the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, otherwise known as the KRA, which measures things like language and counting, basically whether children are ready for the experience of school. It's not a gatekeeping, it's not a test, it's just a point of evaluation. So our staff worked with and evaluated children and presented that information to families. So you might say, well, Jodi, that sounds just fine. What's wrong with supporting 48 families in a tuition-based preschool? You've heard Dr. Cross, you've heard many individuals talk about removing barriers. And in this case, it meant that we were only ever going to serve those 48 families that had the resources for tuition and the transportation to get children here to the zoo. So around the time that the museum was being renovated, the preschool had to be put on pause. And it was at that point that the Toledo Zoo made a decision that rather than being a kindergarten readiness, heavy responsibility in the kindergarten readiness and a tuition-based school, we were going to evolve to a mission-based focus, partner with local preschools as a supplement to their curriculum and what they were providing, and eliminate the tuition. So when the education center opened and we changed that, that's exactly what happened. Now, the objectives of the preschool and the goals of providing that level of, or that conservation education at that age to children didn't necessarily change that much. We still wanted children to have increased knowledge about animals. We still wanted children to have positive attitudes, and the ultimate goal, which is movement towards action or change in behavior. So that still is true. So our preschool then, after that point in time, became, as Jeff said, a community preschool, available at no cost to local preschools who simply sign up and partner with us. So we have preschools. They were here this morning. They will be here tomorrow. Available Monday through Friday. Schools usually start in September and go until the end of the school year in May. They come for about an hour and a half. And there's, again, a theme. So last year's theme was adaptations. This year is habitats. And the children spend a significant amount of time at animal exhibits. The schools, the preschools themselves, about just over, I would say about 70% of our preschools come from Toledo Public Schools, provide their own transportation for students to come and join us here at the zoo. So the things that we found that work really well: open-ended nature play. Remember, these are 3- and 4-year-olds. There's a lot of sensory exploration. As I said, we use the biofacts. They also get to meet our ambassador animals. The snow leopard is not one of our ambassador animals. We do not bring the snow leopard in with preschoolers. but they might be one of our other mammal species. So if we're giving them the example of the significance of fur, we're going to bring in another animal that would be appropriate for preschoolers to meet and make that connection there. The other thing that is really powerful is the teachers from the preschool and our staff are co-teaching and learning together. If you think of in a tuition-based preschool, we may have seen children a couple of times a week, between the 3 and the 4-year-olds. And so you would say, well, they're coming once a month, so we're still getting the benefit of repeated visits. But, well, you're only seeing them once a month. Maybe, they're only maybe visiting us here, but they're returning to the school with what we provide to teachers, which is additional activities and additional curriculum. So even when they return to their school, we are still with them. And they are still engaging in that conservation education because now we're a partner with the teachers that are providing that. So there's 2 things I want to share with you as to kind of a measure of whether we got this right when making this decision to move from a tuition-based preschool to a free community preschool. So the first one is in the numbers. So taking, at the time we were putting this together, we were still registering preschools for this year. So I'm using 2024, 25 as an example, but we had over 40 preschools participating in the free community preschool last year. So we went from 48 students to overseeing over 500 students on average in any given month. The response from particularly our neighborhood in terms of our local schools was overwhelming. And so that right there is, as you've heard Jeff talk earlier in the week about our commitment to the local community, has now provided something that it didn't exist before, potentially. And for a lot of the students that join us here for the free community preschool, it's the first time they've been to the zoo, even as a 3 or 4-year-old. In terms of the communities that we serve, as I said, more than 70% of our community preschools come from the Toledo public area, the Toledo Public School District, as well as some other nearby communities. We can look a little deeper into some of the demographic information that's available on our participants. 34% of our preschools in last year were below a median income of $36,000, and even more so below that. We serve some neighborhoods where the poverty rate under the age of 18 exceeds 80%. And these are the students that are getting to come and have this wonderful experience with us here at the zoo. If you want to see that in kind of a graphic, this is an early map of where the community preschool participants were prior to moving to the free community preschool. There we go, versus now. So even in the same geographic area, not only our closest neighborhood schools, but throughout the greater Toledo area are now participating. Matt mentioned this as part of his challenges as well, and one of the biggest challenges that remains, not just for these community preschools, but for all schools, is transportation. And so that's one of the biggest challenges we still have, is that even the most enthusiastic schools still have challenges with either funding or access to transportation in order for the students to actually join us. Some of them are able to secure grants or other funding that helps with that, but it always remains an ongoing challenge. So the numbers is one way that tells me we made the right decision in moving to a tuition-free community preschool. The other thing that tells me we made the right decision is what our partners and our participants tell us. So I know some of this is a little small, but there's basically 3 things in the reflections and the comments that we get from our participants of the free community preschool that tell me we did the right thing. The first is you will see and hear the word we appreciate, we appreciate, we appreciate. We are grateful that we have this opportunity, that you're providing this. The other thing that comes up more than once is how their reflection of the kindness and the care of our education staff. You probably, somewhere along the way, more than once, someone has asked you who your favorite teacher was. And I will bet that your favorite teacher, or at least the reason behind why someone is your favorite teacher, or why you remember them as their favorite teacher, is one or all of a couple of reasons. They made you feel safe, they made you feel valued, or they made you feel encouraged. And part of feeling safe is kindness and care and respect. And so there's few things that make me as proud of our education staff as to see others reflecting in their kindness and care that they give to the children that come to join us here. And the part that I think is probably most important, and what we've talked about a lot throughout this week, is the number of times that our partners or our participants say the children returned talking about the animals. One of the earlier quotes said, they all came back talking about animals with backbones. Or this last one, the teacher that shared this with us was talking about her own son. And she said he showed a genuine interest in what he learned. He demanded we go to the zoo on weekends and was able to repeat what he taught to his sister and dad without hesitation. That's the legacy that we're looking for. Because through all of these stories that you've heard, that is what is going to move us. Oh, let's go the other way. That is what's going to move us into this next generation of caretakers. And as I said, Alex has talked about learning as part of Project Prairie, and Matt has talked about, his students that are learning along in the Turtle program. And part of what is so valuable in that is that the children are able to learn in the natural world, which is a powerful place to begin that value and that learning. So somewhere in those little faces, is the next Joe Wood, the next Matt Cross, the next Alex Burris, and the next Jeff Saylor. And regardless of their role, all of you that have joined us here and all of those roles within here at the Toledo Zoo are all caretakers. And they're all individuals who long ago decided of all the things they could choose to do as a career to be caretakers for these important species. And whether they'll admit it or not, they're all educators. Because they made the decision to be engaged with conservation in this way. So I hope that gives you a little inspiration for what happens when you remove barriers for children, when you remove barriers to the community, and the only benefit that then comes from that as these children grow is their contribution to these wonderful animals and these wonderful species that you've learned about over these past few days. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here and for being a part of this celebration.
Thank you, Jodi. That was great. I want to thank all of you for coming here. Many of you have been here for all 3 days. I've been so excited about this program and pulling it together, and it's been amazing to see how many people have come out and participated and been able to see the great work that the Toledo Zoo does. We get 1 million visitors a year, and you can imagine all that goes into facilitating an experience at a public park for 1 million different people. And, you can get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about all the good work that we do because it takes so many different things, so many different cogs in the wheel to keep this whole enterprise going. I mean, it's everything from our custodians to the wonderful staff that serves the lunches here to the parks op people that make sure you can get in the gate and the security guards that make sure you're safe and the zookeepers that take care of all the animals. It's really a lot that goes into an institution that has been here 125 years, and like I said, sees so many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people every year. So being able to sit back and take 3 days to really concentrate on the good work that all that effort produces is really important. So this is a photo that's near and dear to me. It's 1977 in June, and that's me. I hadn't quite turned 3 yet, and I'm busily chasing that peacock at the St. Louis Zoo. And I will tell you, even though, like I said, I had not quite turned 3 yet, I still have memories of that visit. 48 years later, I can remember that trip to that zoo. Zoos are incredibly powerful when it comes to inspiring people. And like I said at the beginning of the week, we know that people come here primarily to have a great day out with their family. But we can't forget about the serendipitous inspiration that can occur and can produce all of these great speakers that we've had. All of these people that have grown up passionate about animals and conservation and have gone off to do such great things around the world. My guess is if I ask Kari or Joe or Oliver or Narelle, they probably all have very early memories of going to zoos. And it's funny, even our detractors. So, some of the people that are really against captive wildlife, when I've read some of their books, even in those situations, their earliest memories that drove them to want to learn about and protect animals came from visits to zoos. Like 201. Zoos have the ability to inspire people in really amazing ways. And I had this very, very early trip. I mean, going to the zoo was something my family did as something that would be fun and enjoyable and affordable. This isn't me because we couldn't find the old photo, but then the next thing, was to go to zoo camp. So I remember going to zoo camp as an 8-year-old and getting to go behind the scenes and see the tiger and stand there like this animal standing up against his night house roaring at us. And at the time, liability was a little less tricky and lawsuits were a little less problematic. So we got to hand feed the bears. That was fun. They just told us, make sure you hold your hand flat. We made it. I still have it. But it was those early experiences that really mapped out my life. Like Oliver, I grew up taking care of birds in my own aviary. I mean, you hear about the stories of orphan children raised by wolves in the wild. I can tell you, I was raised by homing pigeons, and grew up. There's a reason so many of these presentations were about doves today. I did my graduate work with this species, and over the years have worked with birds in several zoos. I've had the honor to work for some of the greatest zoo organizations in the world. And I can tell you, even this species right here, I saw the first live one when I was 14 years old, once again at the St. Louis Zoo, and was completely captivated by it. This is the same species Joe talked about that, 2015, 2016, was down to 11 animals left in the United States. We brought them all here to the Toledo Zoo. In fact, where is he? Chuck's around here somewhere, hiding. There he is. Chuck was the bird curator here at the zoo at that time, and the two of us gathered these birds together, worked with our bird department. Stacy Becker hand-raised, I don't know how many dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these baby birds, and went from 11 birds to nearly 150, and actually turned this species around so it could inspire others. Because I couldn't have the animal that inspired me to get a graduate degree, to go forward and become a director at a zoo, I couldn't have it disappear from the U.S. continent. And now they're here in great numbers. I think, we have 70 here on grounds at this point, because we won't let them wink out. We provide them to zoos all over the country so that other people can be inspired by them. But when you start to pull all this together and think about all the things that go into a zoo, all the opportunities for these animals to touch the public and to inspire them, and really you don't know what animal is going to do that, right? Who would have thought that's going to capture a 14-year-old's imagination, right? Just walking through and saying, who's ever seen a pigeon that's got a bright pink head and a solid green back and this beautiful white and black band? You just don't know. But I can bet you, all of you saw animals. Many of you in this room probably have memories from the zoo and animals that you thought were particularly memorable or powerful as far as the experience goes. And that's why zoos are important. That's why the work we do here is important. And I would hope we're still here in another 125 years. We couldn't do it without the support of all the people in this room. We couldn't do it without Synovus Energy coming and sponsoring these talks, so thank you for that. You know, we've got board members in the room that are busily making sure the zoo is here and sustainable for the future in its many different forms. I've got colleagues here from the zoos around the United States that have been very important to me from a mentorship standpoint and friendship standpoint. And it's great to work in a community that is trying to do good in the world. And trying to do good in the world in so many places, and trying to uplift people who don't have opportunity, and trying to uplift communities so they can protect their wildlife. Leveraging the skills of people who've dedicated their lives to caring for wildlife here and helping to save those species in the wild. So, and Monica, I didn't see you there. Monica also helped with many of these pink-necked fruit doves, and Adam next to her. So it takes a village, right? So with that, I'd like to invite all of you to lunch. And I hope if you've gotten a ticket to the gala tonight, and we'll see you there. But otherwise, thank you for your support of the zoo. Thank you for paying attention to us for a few days, and for your ongoing support.